Oh, okay.
her accepted duty.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Board of Selectmen meeting here, April the 11th. Tonight's agenda is a pretty simple one. We're going to do some deliberation just to discuss what we're going to, just kind of the format and how we're going to ask questions, and we're going to discuss some questions. And then we'll bring in the first candidate somewhere around 6:15. And then we'll interview that individual for approximately an hour, and then we'll bring in the second candidate sometime around 7 p.m., 7:30, and interview that individual for about an hour. We will do some deliberation with hopes of making a decision this evening, and that's kind of how the process will lay out. I have some other notes, but like every meeting, we like to get started with the pledge to the flag, and I ask the clerk if he would please lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Okay. Phones are off. Couldn't even tell my phone was on all day.
Nobody called?
Yeah, it was no. Thought maybe my battery was dead or something. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to have just some discussion around how we're going to proceed this evening during the interview process. I will ask that everybody be respectful of both candidates. We had quite a process that we went through. We had a selection committee, so Selectman Gerbing and myself put together a process. That process was laid out to the full board, along with the support of the town administrator and the assistant town administrator back in October. We selected a committee of 7 of our peers, 7 residents, some of which were on boards and committees, and we had three community members at large. And since October, they've been working tirelessly to whittle down from over 40 resumes, 40 candidates, I should say, they weren't resumes, 40 candidates submitted for the position, 41 candidates, I believe it was, submitted for the position. And through a very fair and open and honest process, they selected candidates to move on to the next step, which was interviews with that selection committee. That selection committee further narrowed the field down to 5 candidates. Those 5 candidates were put through an assessment center. And I hope that none of you has to ever go through an assessment center similar to what these candidates had to go through, because some of us had the opportunity to witness the assessment center, and it was presented and conducted by a professional consulting company that is made up of chiefs of police in Massachusetts. And they did role plays, they did a number of scenarios, written examples, and the 5 candidates that went through that assessment process were tested. And I can guarantee you, each and every one of them learned something through that process. Through that process, the selection committee got back together after the assessment. The assessors gave them their recommendations, and the selection committee has delivered to this board the 2 top candidates. I will ask that everybody be respectful of both candidates. I will not allow for any public input. There will not be any questioning. I hope that there will not be any guffawing or any comments or anything under folks' breath. Both of these candidates deserve that respect. They both are in a position to become our police chief. And I truly believe that the 7-member working group that brought us these 2 candidates should be commended. Selectman Napoli and Selectman Knox were 2 representatives from our Board of Selectmen. And they I truly feel as though we have the two best candidates, and this is the final step in that process where the five of us have an opportunity, and the candidates have an opportunity to present themselves to the town. And we will facilitate that opportunity, and we will ask questions, and hopefully that'll give us what we need in order to make a selection for your next police chief. All right. That being said, I'll open it up to the members to discussion. We did distribute some questions that Selectman Gerbing and myself worked along with the vice chair of the screening committee, Gary Wilson, who's the personnel rep for the FinCom. Mr. Wilson has put a lot of time and effort into this, and I appreciate. I probably should name everybody on the committee, but I'm afraid I'm going to leave people off. But I do thank all of them for all that they've done.
Just one quick thing.
Please.
The chairman of that committee sends his regrets not being able
Thank you. Yes.
to be here because of the death of his mother.
Yeah, Mr. Carr was the chairman of that committee, Mr. Wilson was the vice chair, Mr. Wilson's here representing them, I assume, or perhaps just an interested resident, but Mr. Carr did send his condolences and our, or not his condolences, his regrets, and we send out our condolences to Mr. Carr and to the Carr family as Jim's mom passed away this past week. All right, members, we've got a list of questions in front of us. We had some discussion on Monday evening, charged Chase and I with coming up with some questions. These are kind of the high-level questions, give the candidates an opportunity to respond. Average of about 3 minutes per response, and then I'll likely look to see if anybody has any kind of follow-up, not necessarily in any structured form, just ask if anybody has any follow-up, and we'll kind of guide the discussion that way.
Do you want me to describe how we got from the screening committee questions to these? So what we did is we took the questions that were asked of the candidates during the screening process. We evaluated them with the help of the vice chair of the screening committee to identify which ones were differentiators between candidates at this point in the process. And which questions were essentially gateway questions. That is, during the screening process, if someone didn't answer this question well, they wouldn't be sitting in front of us here today. So we got rid of some of those. We reworded others so the candidates aren't seeing the same questions, and then we added a couple of additional questions that will be completely unique to them. So it's a mix of what was in the screening committee questions and some new ones as well. Most of which have been reworded in one way, shape, or form.
Thanks, Chase. So I'll just kind of open it up to my colleagues, if anybody has any input, thoughts. Do we want to kind of set up, if we don't have any input on the actual questions, or if we don't want to tweak them at all?
I think you did a good job. Any additional questions or comments about them?
Well, I would note one thing, questions, I'm sorry, never mind. That's correct. Disregard that.
Kevin?
If it's okay with the board, I'll probably take question number one, just because I'll start the dialogue with the candidates. Kind of set some ground rules with them, and then I'll just roll into the first question, where it is kind of just an introduction, and tell us about yourself and
Okay.
what brings you here. You guys okay with that?
Sure.
As far as from that point forward, there's 5 of us, there are 10 questions. Can't do that math real quickly. Roughly 2 each.
So from
Rounding
that
up,
point, do you want to
rounding
just
up.
start with Joe and go down the
1.4
row?
each.
From that point?
Comfortable with that?
Yeah, let's just do that.
Okay.
Did you reach a decision on when you thought it would be appropriate to have follow-ups after these 10 are asked, or along the way?
That's open for discussion, Paul. I think it's more appropriate along the way, because it's
Yeah,
going to
I think
be
along the
germane to the
That's
conversation.
that's how the search committee did it, that
Right.
if there were follow-up questions that came to mind in response to something you just heard, that then would be the time to do it.
With-
That's
with-
the question with the chair's permission.
All right, and if topics aren't covered anywhere in the questions but come up at the end then?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Time permitting, right? Anthony, you serving kind of as a ad hoc timekeeper type of thing? Are you okay with that, or?
Sure.
What,
The clock's behind
you
him.
looking, well, he's got a couple clocks. We need Melly,
I do need one.
the red flag. Okay, so Cindy, we'll do number 5. Guys, if you're looking over the questions and there's one that you, as long as we end up with 2 each, if there's one that you particularly want to ask, I don't think it really matters who asks, reads the question essentially, it's just a matter of the follow-up.
No, it doesn't matter.
The only thing I would note is in terms of the follow-up, I don't personally intend on necessarily asking follow-up on everyone. I think we'll get bogged down if we each try and ask some type of follow-up question. So keep it focused on germane and relevant follow-up questions.
Right, well, we found during the initial screening process, really, the first or second follow-up question pretty much answered everybody's follow-up question.
And speak up, guys, because I'm not going to go down the line and say, Joe, do you have any follow-ups? Chase, do you have any follow-ups? Cindy, I'm just going to say, are there any follow-ups?
Right.
And if you have one, just through the chair, ask, just
Okay.
say, I'd like to ask a follow-up question, and we'll kind of go that way, and if we feel as though the question's been answered, we'll just move on.
I really want you to call my name.
I'll call you name, Joe, I promise. All right, let's see. I think I've covered all the kind of the pre-meeting stuff that I wanted to get out there, unless anybody has anything to offer, or. Oh, just amongst ourselves, I would ask that each one of us take your own notes. These notes are part of an HR record. The record will be kept for 1 year, at which time they'll be destroyed. So
What we don't have is one for each person, though.
we're gonna, I believe we're gonna, yeah, there's a second set
one.
first.
No.
All right.
I don't want to confuse them.
Thank you for that. All right, so, I think everything else has to do with the
Order of interviewees,
order of interviews.
the basis, why we're doing it the way, order that we're doing.
Oh, as far as the first ones, that one. So we did, the order of the interviewees is, it happens to be alphabetical. We did a coin toss. We had the town clerk and the admin from the town administrator's office do a coin toss. Mr. Bernard ended up being the person that's going first, so Mr. Bernard, or Sergeant Bernard will be the first candidate in front of us, and Deputy Chief Santoro will be the second candidate. So I think you know what we know at this point, and I think we're probably prepared to bring the candidate. Thank you. So guys, I'll just, when Sergeant Bernard comes in, I'll do a quick intro, just kind of ground rules, if you will. And then I'll roll it into that first question. Thank you.
And if it becomes necessary, particularly as we go on, that if there are more people that show up than we have chairs, that there is an overflow room right next door, the multipurpose room. We have a live TV set up with additional chairs if we go beyond. No one wants to sit up front, though, so we still have the front pews are available.
Pews. No need to genuflect, though. He was always a front row guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, John was always the front row guy.
Make some room. How about you? Mr. Tilly? For now.
I don't know, you almost lost me yesterday. You hadn't heard that story, huh?
All right.
Stay out of New Hampshire.
Guy blew through a stop sign and hit me while I was crossing the road.
Looking good. How are you? Good. How are you? Still wearing the same
Ambulance,
suit?
emergency room, x-rays, the whole bit.
It works.
I'm in pain.
Had it for about 20 years.
I date a pharmacist. I'm okay.
I'm in my 60s now, so.
We can't ask that.
No, I can volunteer that. And I reach 80% next year.
I heard you were gonna become a lineman so you could get into group 4.
Yeah, that would be,
Just do
yeah.
3
yeah,
years.
And then deploy me for, that's another story.
Sergeant Bernard, welcome.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks for having us.
Where's my gavel?
All right, yeah, maybe
You're the last.
keep it.
All right, so just some basic ground rules. We're going to ask you a series of questions and give an opportunity to answer those questions. We'll kind of open it up for any kind of follow-up questions. How long are we here for? An hour and 15 or an hour?
You want the meeting?
An hour-ish, in about an hour.
10 minutes?
10 minutes. Into the Evelyn Woods version.
Right.
So, the only thing that I want to kind of throw out there is we've got two candidates that came through the process. Obviously, you know that better than most. You were through that process. Our expectation is that at the end of this process, we're gonna pick a finalist to offer the police chief's job to. So if there's gonna be a number one, there's gonna be a number two. Our expectation is that number one will go through the process, there's contract negotiations, there's background checks, all that kind of stuff that we have to go through. In the event that you come up as number one and number two, would like your commitment that you would stand by and you'd accept the position. If you're not number one and number one falls out of the equation, for whatever reason, that you would step up and still accept the position if you were selected second. All right, okay. Okay, I think that's it. The other thing I just want to put out there is I'm hopeful and I believe that the other candidate is not in the room. And it is an open meeting, so you have the opportunity to be in this room. Anybody can be in this room during an open meeting, just out of courtesy. You know the stress that you're going through today, I'm sure. And it's just out of courtesy to the other candidate. I would ask you that you not be in the room with the other candidates interviewing, just like I hope that he's not in the room and I don't see him here while you're being interviewed. That's kind of my own little ask. All right, you ready?
As I'll ever be.
Fair enough. So I'll ask you the first question, then we'll just kind of go down the line.
Okay.
Take up to 3 minutes to briefly introduce yourself and explain your motivation for applying for this position. Basically, explain to us why you're here today.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't have to tell my name. I'm Matthew Pinard, in case you were wondering. Most of you know me from around town. Some of you know me for 35, 40 years now. I started police work 24 years ago. I went to the police academy. I was a part-time police officer in Air. My mother and father pushed me through and told me to get out of the house pretty much and do something. Wasn't doing well in college at that point. 16 years ago, after being a police officer in Air, I came here to Littleton. When I came here to Littleton, I started off as a patrolman. I then became a motorcycle officer, detective, and Littleton's first school resource officer. We brought that campus from a locked facility to a from an open facility to a locked and closed facility. I served 10 years as a detective / school resource officer and led in several investigations. 6 years ago, I knew it was time that I wanted to move up through the ranks, and I became a sergeant and part of the command staff for the department. During that time, I took on every single administrative function I could ask for. I took on scheduling of details. I took on scheduling of time off. I took on firearms licensing. I took on training and any administrative task that would come upon me. Part of one of those administrative tasks that came upon me was to be the assistant accreditation manager, which we've recently brought our department to accreditation. Basically, we gave the Littleton Police Department a playbook and a guidelines to show transparency within our department. I'm a respected member of the Littleton community, and I've ingrained myself into this community. I knew then, 5 years ago when I took rank, that it was time and what I wanted to do. I love the town of Littleton, and I wanted to make sure the town of Littleton had a great leader for its police chief. And that's why I'm here before you today.
Okay. Thank you. Any follow-up?
Sergeant, early in your career, what mistake might you have made that you learned from the most and influenced your career today?
Early in my career,
Or any time in your career?
I think the one mistake that I made early in my career would be that of arresting somebody. And let me expound upon that if you don't mind. You go to the police academy, they teach you how to enforce the laws, and they teach you to catch bad guys. But what they didn't teach you back then was to be empathetic. Doing what's right is not always what's doing the right thing. And it took a seasoned veteran to kind of ingrain that in my head. When you place someone under arrest, mother, child in the back seat, tires bald for an expired license, am I following the law? Absolutely. Is it something that we could have avoided? Maybe she didn't have the money for those tires. Maybe she didn't have the money to pay that fine. Is it something that we could have worked upon? The one that got caught shoplifting a bottle of milk, did I have to lock that person up? That's what I was taught in the police academy, and that's what I thought was right. In Littleton, what I brought here not too long ago was a program called C4RJ. It's restorative practices. It's mending the wrongs of the community, puts the victim and the witness together in one, and it keeps their criminal record clean. Restorative practices are the future, and if you're a little empathetic and you see what happens and you see the future of how we can handle crimes differently with a different tool, then that's the way we should be going. So if I learned something early in my career, it's that not everybody has to get arrested. Doing the right thing sometimes isn't doing the right thing.
Thanks.
Go ahead, please.
So, Sergeant, so you've learned that lesson. How have you tried to convey that lesson to patrolmen under your command And how will you continue to try and teach that lesson to young patrolmen coming right out of the academy?
It's actually great that you brought that up, Chase. And the reason is, again, I sit on the police council for the restorative justice, and I'm constantly pushing our officers to look at the big picture and not get focused on the person with an expired license, the person with that minor crime. Let's get to the big picture. Let's get that person some help if they need it.
Can you give me a specific example of pushing somebody to look towards the big picture?
Absolutely. We review a lot of the cases that come across the desk for the arrests. Some of them will be summons that go to court. We can take that summons and hold it and have a conversation with that officer that had the summons go forward and say, hey, would this be a good case? And why would this be a good case to go to a restorative practice, to go to a diversion rather than go to court? What are you going to get from it if it goes to court? What are they going to get from it to go to court? Expired license, or let's say a shoplifting, like I said earlier. They go to court. Everybody knows how court works. It could be pushed off 5, 6, 7 times before there actually is a resolution come to. And what's the resolution going to be? Pay the fine, $50, don't do it again. What does the victim get out of that resolution? The victim doesn't get a thing out of that resolution. Maybe they get their money for the stolen property. But what do they get out of it? Do they have a voice when it goes to court? They don't. The voice is the voice that comes from them in front of that suspect, and they can tell why they're a victim.
Any other follow-ups?
If I could just ask you, thank you, Mr. Chairman, to expand the same basic question to apply to the department as a whole. You've been with the department, what, 16 years in Littleton? During that time, is there any systemic problem that either was changed along the way within department practice, or is there an outstanding issue that needs to be addressed along those lines, and what has been your role in either helping to achieve that, or what would it be?
24 years ago when I started, policing as we knew it then is not policing as we know it now. Transparency is beyond recognition right now. Everybody has a video camera. Everybody has their own spin on things. And unless you're transparent in any actions that go forward, you're not going to win the public's trust. If there's any kind of question of wrongdoing within the department, if that is not opened up and transparent, then it's not going to go, we're not going to build that trust for the 21st century policing. We just won't. It'll only put us back a step or two.
Good. Any other follow-ups? Jeez, you're up.
So Sergeant, what tools or training is or has been most beneficial to your preparation for the role of chief of police? So tools or training that's been beneficial to you?
I can't honestly tell you one specific tool or one specific training class. What I can tell you is that I have worked for 6 different police chiefs in my career. I've seen their styles of leadership. I've seen their positive styles. I've seen their negative styles. I've been to a multitude of classes over the 24 years, both as a patrolman, a detective, a sergeant. And I could not give you one specific class or tool as to how I'm going to be a good chief or what I'm going to use as being a good chief. I think it's the culmination of everything that I've done, the leaders that I've followed, the chiefs that I've seen, the sergeants that I've worked for, lieutenants that I've worked for, classes that I've attended. I think it's going to be a culmination of all of that.
So what characteristic of someone who, if you've worked under 6 chiefs, what characteristic of one of your past leaders has been something that you want to emulate as a police chief?
Inspirational. Leadership's going to be constantly changing as to who you're dealing with, especially dealing with the millennials that are coming through. We need to foster their ideas and try to cultivate them, get their ideas, get them to have some buy-in. So if we inspire them to come forward and talk about it and be part of the whole mission, then we're going to make a team that's unstoppable.
So in the last 6 years as a sergeant, give me an example of something that you've done to try and inspire the men and women working under your command.
My shift alone, I work the split shift. I have 3 officers that work for me. One of the things that I've tried to inspire in them is to give me some ideas as to what they want to do for the shift, what they see is going to be beneficial for the town. One of the things that we've started was the officers actually get out of the car and walk around the point. The point is the first place that in this town that they can actually park the car and probably hit 10, 15 stores, restaurants, make contacts with people. My shift has taken community policing to the next level.
Any follow-ups, folks?
Yeah, I do. Do you currently share any responsibilities in your present role with the chief of police?
Yes. The chief is the ultimate accreditation manager, along with the deputy chief. The chief is also the one that is in charge of the schedule. If the schedule's done wrong, it's going to fall upon to him. So I do share the responsibilities on myself and the deputy chief.
Of scheduling, okay. Great, thanks.
Anyone else? Cindy?
Number 4, transition challenges. Given your current chain of command, you'd leapfrog the current deputy. What challenges do you see in your transition to chief of police, and how will you address them?
It's kind of like the elephant in the room, going from sergeant up over the deputy chief. Luckily for me, Jeff Patterson is a complete professional. Him and I worked for 10 years together in the Detective Bureau. We had a relationship that is unspeakable. We brought many cases to succession in front of the court. Him and I have talked before, during, and we've had dinner since then together. As I was finding out, he was finding out the same time that I was going forward, he wasn't. And he reached out to me, and we've talked it through. I have no issue whatsoever that we won't take the Littleton Police Department together forward into the future as a team. Matter of fact, I think Jeff's probably here somewhere to support me. So I have no issues whatsoever. And I know that some people have questioned the fact of me working patrol was so close to some of the officers. And yes, it's true. I go to calls with the officers right now. I handle calls with them. I know their wives. I know their husbands, their boyfriends. I know their kids. And some say, isn't that going to be kind of tough for you to step up and have to dole out some consequences to them if they do wrongdoing? And I don't see any issue with that whatsoever going forward. I think that I have gained the respect of every officer, every sergeant in our department, and that they'll put themselves on a higher pedestal and make sure they're doing the right thing.
Can you give me a specific example of when you have had a policing disagreement with one of your peers and had to engage in a difficult conversation where you thought something could or should be done differently. What I'm looking for, you said you don't anticipate any issues. I want to understand an experience that you've had where you've had to sort of push that.
I'll talk about it, something that happened this week. Very minor thing, but something happened this week. We're required to wear a uniform. Sometimes our uniforms aren't the most comfortable at points in time. Sometimes our officers will push the limit on what they wear. And if it doesn't follow any policy or protocol, a little chat to make sure they fall back in line. Certain officer was pushing the limit with me, and I had to pull him aside today, or actually Monday, in regards to the uniform and cleanliness and upkeep. And you could tell that was taken back a little bit, but was respected for my decision and how I talked to him. Nobody wants to be talked down to. Everybody wants to, no matter who you are, you want to have respect and dignity. And I would show that to my officers. And I think that's where I gain their respect, because I respect them.
I'm just going to take the challenges of the transition just one step further, so we've kind of spoken specifically about the leapfrog and the relationship with the department. Is there any other challenge that you foresee transitioning into the role of chosen to be our chief of police, and how would you address it?
Yeah. One of my biggest challenges is going to be the budget and grants. I've already started addressing it a ways back. I've talked to several chiefs in the area. I've talked to Chief King in regards to the budget already. He's willing to help me, and he's still only going to be a phone call away. I reached out to Bonnie Mae Fleck, who is ultimately the one that's going to control the budget and how it works. Reached out to Chief Denmark in Harvard, and we sat down and we talked about the budget and how the budget works. I may not know how it works right now, but each and every one of them have assured me they won't let me fail, and I'm willing to learn on how the budget is, where the money gets put, where I can cut costs, where I can add to. So I don't foresee any issues there, but is it an issue right now? Yes, it is. It's going to be a hurdle, but it's not going to be an obstacle.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you did.
Okay, please provide an example of conflict in a personnel situation with a supervisor or someone you supervised that you ultimately resolved.
You want a specific example?
Yeah, I don't know that you need to mention names, but a specific example, sure.
Okay.
Describe them, maybe physically, and we can figure it
Yeah.
out.
This one supervisor is here for his 8-hour shift and goes home. Doesn't go above, does not go beyond. And I'm not saying here, this is a supervisor. On a Sunday morning, I responded to a pretty in-depth call, one where an infant had passed. And I was going to that call at 10 minutes of 7. Supervisor worked the night before. Last thing he wanted to do was respond to that call. Last thing he did was respond to that call. Let us handle it, even though he knew the call. Most people would have responded to that call to give you some assistance. I was there by myself first, then another officer joined me, then the fire department, the ambulances. It was very dramatic and very emotionally moving. Came back to the station, found out that the supervisor just left. And it really and truly bothered me. What I learned from that was I tried fostering that and I tried keeping that closed up inside. I didn't want to express that to him because I didn't know how to approach him. But communication not only works from the top coming down, it has to work from the bottom and go up also. I didn't let that fester inside me. I brought that supervisor and we had a one-on-one conversation in regards to it. What I didn't know was that he actually went to the dispatch center and was monitoring the call to make sure everything was going well before he actually left. So I got his side of the story instead of flying off the handle and having a major issue, which could have been a huge conflict between the two of us. Today we work side by side with each other and there are no issues. And again, the one thing I take from that is if I didn't communicate to him my thoughts and feelings about the conflict, if we didn't try to come to some kind of mediation or resolution about it, that would still be a grudge between the two of us, and it would be a problem.
Thoughts or follow-up to that, folks?
You do a quick follow-up to it. So that was a supervisor, that was one of your supervisors. Can you tell me what someone that you supervise, how they would describe your handling of personnel situations and conflicts? What, if they were sitting here and I said, tell me about Sergeant Bernard, tell me what his strengths are where it comes to resolving personnel situations, and tell me what his weaknesses are. What do you think they would say?
I can tell you exactly what they would say, because I sat with them in one of my offices today and I asked them that question. He told me today in my office that he appreciates my leadership style because I'm a leader and not a boss to him. I let him do his job, and I don't question what they're doing or until it's to the point where I need to get involved. I let them do their job. I don't micromanage my shift or my officers. And I try to give them ideas, not orders. And that was at 8:30 this morning in my office.
We didn't tee that one up. So, okay, so let's turn it around. So we've hit a strength. What do you think is a weakness, a place that you could work on and improve that would help you continue to become a better and stronger leader and manager in those challenging personnel situations?
I would say that to a fault, I'm too empathetic to the officers, to where I want them to do a good job. So sometimes I will be at that point where I'm like, do they really want to do that? Make sure that they go forward with the proper case. So, does that make sense to you?
I think it does. You want to give me an example of what you mean?
Sure. As I don't like to jump on my officers and I let them do their job, I'm also in the background trying to watch everything they do to make sure it's being done properly, giving them that, but yet having my ear close to the radio, making sure I read over their reports afterwards, making sure I'm paying attention to the detail of the job, detail of what they're doing, detail of the call. Almost to a fault, it's too much, but not letting them know that I'm actually doing that. So that'll be a weakness on my side.
All right. You've mentioned and alluded to and kind of incorporated community policing into some of your answers and not I'm not specifically calling it out as community policing, but what is your philosophy on community policing?
Well, Littleton Police Department does a phenomenal job with community policing. We work with the community, and we figure out where the needs are of our department. It was 15 years ago that we put a school resource officer into the school. And we didn't just put a police officer in the school, we put a school resource officer in the school. We put someone there that the school could use as a resource for the staff, for the students, the faculty, for the parents. When I went into school 15 years ago, I taught classes. Not that I was a great teacher, but I taught classes. I taught safety to the kindergarten. I was trying to break that gap and build a bridge over it to bring the community together and see me as a person and see people in uniform as a person, not just a police officer. Community policing in Littleton, we do a lot of different things. Bicycle patrols, we have Coffee with the Cop, we're here on third Thursdays. We're open, we're out. We have open houses at the police station. We have neighborhood meetings. We're not going to be able to come up with an idea like that for a new community policing trend because one department's doing it. Our community policing has to come from our village, from the people that come to us and people that talk to us what they want to see. And that's why the different avenues for community policing happen. And I plan on growing our community policing to the needs of the community.
And kind of follow Chase's suit here a little bit. I mean, I love the fact that you're talking about it being organic and coming from our village and fostering that and growing it that way. Do you have any thoughts or insights as to just one example of
Absolutely, and like I said earlier, one of the big things is I want to start putting more bicycle patrols into the neighborhoods, into the point, walking beats into the point. We're going to keep going with the Student Police Academy. It's been absolutely fantastic and well-received throughout the community. Will we add a second week on this year? We'll see. We're going to add, we have a school resource officer. Do I see us adding another school resource officer on in the future? Absolutely. Absolutely. The community is already speaking to the school committee about it. They want it. They want to have another officer in the school. And it's not having a police officer in the school, it's having that resource for the school in there.
follow up? Go.
I've got one, but I've asked a lot of follow-ups, so.
Can I throw a follow-up on my own question?
Sure.
So you mentioned SRO, School Resource Officer, and there's been some conversation. Our school resource officer is in basically civvies. They're in uniform because they've got a shirt on that clearly identifies them as a school resource officer. It says Little Police Department. They've got a badge. They've got a sidearm. What is your opinion of the school resource officer wearing civilian clothes versus being in uniform?
I was never in a uniform. I was always in a polo shirt and khaki pants. The push going forward is having more of a uniformed officer in the school, but I don't foresee that happening here in Littleton. Maybe some type of soft uniform where the polo with the badge is going to be worn, with a marked cruiser outside. But we want to break those barriers to have the students still approach that person as a police officer and know that they're a person inside. I know I had talked about that a little while ago, but some people see the uniform and they get scared. And it's not unless the uniform's off that they can be approachable. I want to make sure that all my officers are approachable, and if it means them going into the school without a uniform, great. But they're going to have to wear that uniform every once in a while to remind the students, the faculty, and the staff, this isn't just a guy with a badge and a gun on, this is also a police officer for the town. So, and I think that helps break that barrier down of a uniform and conversation and approachable.
Sorry, go ahead.
Coming back to the origin of the question, which is the philosophy of community policing, you described a number of things that the department has done with respect to community policing. What have you specifically been involved with bringing about with respect to community policing, either in the idea generation, the organization, the implementation, somewhere along those lines,
So-
you specifically?
Maybe I didn't state it correctly. 15 years ago, the school resource officer position was a brand-new position. That was mine.
It was your position, did you make the decision to implement the program?
I was part of making the decision, yes. Yes. The grant came through, which we did not think we were going to get at first. When the grant came through, I went through and I implemented with Chief John Kelly the school resource officer position here in town, which was a big move for both the school department and myself, along with the police department, because it was never had happened here before. One of my highlights of community policing was 2012. I was asked to be the guest speaker of the graduating class. That to me spoke volumes as to breaking the barriers down between police and the students and the youth in this town. You know, it bothers me when you, in uniform, bless you, in uniform market basket, and a mother says, keep it up and he's going to arrest you. That is by far the worst message you could send to your son or daughter. And I feel that I've done a great job, and I did do a great job, bringing that program into Littleton. The other program that we worked on, if you want another one, was what I talked about earlier, was restorative justice. We get people from the community to sit on that panel, sit on that board, and that mends the wrongs in our community volumes. It was our choice to use restorative justice. I don't know if you remember the bus fire, when the buses caught on fire. That was a huge outcry from the town. And we decided at that point, when we went to prosecution, that part of the resolution was going to be to complete restorative justice. And we had people from the environmental DEP here. We had Helen Ham from the bus company. We put them all in the circle with these kids that had lit these buses on fire by accident. And so these kids could actually see this. It's what our community wanted. It's what we did. So restorative justice is one of the programs that I brought here to town.
And tell me a little bit about how you brought it. I want to hear about the process, you know, what role you specifically played in bringing it, in proposing it, and implementing it.
John Kelly tried bringing it here a while ago, and basically the district attorneys told him no. Chief Len Weatherby in Concord basically told the district attorneys, oh, well, I'm bringing it in. So Concord brought it in. Myself and John Kelly saw what he did, and we went forward and we got that program, and we brought it here to Littleton. We were the ones that went and grabbed it from them, talked to their shareholders, and brought it to us here. Wasn't really well received at first by the DA's office, but we made it happen.
And how did you resolve those, for lack of a better word, conflicts with the
Conflict with the DA's office? They actually embraced it after a while, and as a matter of fact, it's, we told them we were doing it, if that's how you want to, it was very autocratic. if
There's
that's
a lot
what
of
you're
different
looking for.
styles,
Yes,
that's one of
at
them.
that point in time, we told them we were doing it. Thanks. And basically, that's how it happened, but since then, fast forward now, 16 years, there's actually a bill in front of the Senate and how it's going to actually be incorporated into the the court system and diversion and how that's all going to work apart. You're snickering, did you already know that?
No, no, no,
Oh,
not
oh.
at all.
You follow up to it, or?
No,
No. I figured you knew about the bill already, and that's why you were snickering at me.
no.
All those years I told my kids, keep it up and get arrested,
Yeah.
that's bad.
You're one of those dads.
Joe? Good. I just had to call on you.
I bet you don't say that to your grandchildren.
It's different, right?
We'll move on.
Not one bit.
If you discovered that one of your officers had a personal bias that you thought might affect their judgment, how would you address that matter?
Well, first of all, I would bring that officer. Yes, is that what is it, an officer or a civilian? Bring that officer into my office and have a conversation. Make sure that they knew what was happening and what was brought to my attention of the bias. Make sure the bias was brought to their attention and they acknowledged exactly what the bias is. Hopefully get to the bottom of why they have the bias. Offer them some help through counseling or whatnot if they so need it. But most of all, document it and make sure that they know that that bias will not be in our workplace in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you.
Follow-ups? Nice. Give it up, Chiefs, number 8.
Money question. Figure we get there eventually, right? Fiscal pressures demand that the community continually strive for greater efficiencies in our operations. Articulate how you'll balance the fiscal responsibility, finite resources, and diverse set of demands within town when you're preparing your budgets. So, balancing fiscal responsibility, finite resources, and varied demands.
Well, as I stated earlier, one of my shortfalls is going to be the budget. But financing and shortfalls, I balance my own budget at home. I have my own finances at home. I have a perfect credit score. And I'm willing to learn how the budget's going to work. I'd like to look forward to different grants that we can apply for, especially with the school resource officer position coming up. See if there's anything going to be opened up. Different highway grants that we can apply for. And I'm not saying I'm going to be the best grant writer, but we do have people within the department that we can tap on their shoulder to make sure they assist me in writing those grants. So, kind of a short answer. I don't really know how the budget's going to work or where I'm going to cut corners, but I know that I'll be the one to lean on certain people to make sure that I can figure out how to cut corners, to cut the overtime down, to be financially responsible.
So where do you think that the single biggest budget issue going forward may be, let's say the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you see the biggest budgetary problem arising?
Salaries. We need to add more officers onto our department. We need to add more dispatchers onto our department. Salaries probably take up about 85–90% of our budget right now. We have to account for contractual raises. We have to account for adding bodies on. With Littleton growing like it is, with the dispatch center taking over the EMD portion of it, we can't just have one dispatcher there on at a time. We need to have more than one. So we're going to have to add bodies. Where we get the money, how we get the money, is there regional grant money? I don't know those answers. Am I going to research them? Am I going to try to find them? Absolutely.
Any follow-ups to the money question?
No.
Did you ever consider advertising on the broadcast?
And they tried that.
So is that a no?
Question number 9, what motivates and inspires you to come to work every day?
Yeah. When I started this job 24 years ago, I wanted to make a difference. And I know everybody kind of says that's corny, making a difference, but I love this town. I love the people in this town. And if I can reach out to one person to make sure that I've helped them that day, if I can reach out to that one officer to make sure that he's having a good day, that inspires me. That motivates me. I have gone above and beyond to make sure that people have seen my face, have done the right thing. And I can't tell you enough how fulfilled I am inside to know that I've helped that person through a good time, through a bad time, through a challenging time in their life. Yeah, that's what inspires me, Cindy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Follow that up real quick.
Yeah, please.
Would you say, it's fair to say you get a lot of that inspiration from the members of the community that you're working with?
Absolutely.
Do you
Case
foresee,
in point, if I can, I stopped at the high school to handle an issue on last weekend one day. The seniors were having a luncheon, which was unbeknownst to me, they were having a luncheon there that day. It was absolutely fantastic walking through that cafeteria, talking to the different people, asking them how they're doing, knowing that one of them just had a 59th wedding anniversary, and teasing him about taking his wife to the cafeteria for lunch. I loved it. That stuff inspires me, knowing that they have a familiar face to come and talk to.
so how are you going to balance, as the chief of police, the demands on your time that take you away from the community a little bit?
I don't think the demand's going to take me away from the community. I think the demand's going to be being out in the community more. I think the community wants to see their chief. I think the community wants to have them at their events. That's what I've learned, and that's what I plan on doing, is being that chief that's out in the public, being that chief that's out on Third Thursday seeing people, being the one handling questions at odd times, being thrown at me, being caught off guard. I plan on having that. I plan on fostering that.
What's that?
Paul, you want to round out the
Sure.
the prepared questions at least?
All right. I'll get a drink of water first. Final question. No,
Final prepared question.
The final prepared
The what?
question.
Final prepared question.
Why should we pick you for this position?
Why not? Oh, as I stated just a little while ago, I love this town, and I love the people in it. 24 years I've done law enforcement, 16 of them here in Littleton. I've ingrained myself into this community. I've coached on the flag football field. I've coached kids on the lacrosse field. I've even handed out dictionaries to third graders with the Rotary Club. I've been a guest speaker for many of the different committees, the different safety committees in this town. I've been about the biggest public figure for the department in the last 16 years, besides John Kelly, than anybody else. All the time I was doing everything, I was forging those bonds between the police department and the community, bridging those gaps to have people come talk to me, to have people come talk to the police. I was part of the transition that went from 20 Foster Street, the little tiny outdated police station, to the new 500 Great Road modern, efficient police station. I was there to watch the torch get passed down from Chief Kelly to Chief King. And they did a great job. They put a nice foundation in place for me. But it's time to bring our department to the next level. It's time for me to be a leader to the department. It's time to me to show the town that there's much more that we can be doing for them. Why now? Why now is it that I want to go? Well, first of all, Chief King's retiring, and this is a perfect time. But Littleton is growing leaps and bounds right now. I was doing a firearms license the other day to a longtime resident. And he said to me, which I still can't believe, but he said to me that he can remember riding his bicycle across 495. I can barely get across 495 with lights, sirens, and a big fire truck behind me. We have created so many businesses that have come to town that I am looking forward to be that leader for this department. And I hope that you guys will vote that way tonight to keep the stability within the side of the police department and see some fresh new ideas from me come forward for our officers.
Mr. Chairman, if I might ask.
Please do.
One follow-up. I very much appreciate, Sergeant, that you have an upbeat and bullish attitude toward not only your own tenure, but the department as a whole. I share that. But I think it's important for everybody listening, and especially for this board, to know as you enter the, prospectively, this position in a period of change, are there big lingering problems or smaller under-the-radar problems within the department that you plan on addressing or think need further attention?
There's always some small problems within the department that need addressing, whether it's our department or the fire department or the highway department. There's always going to be problems. You have 19, 20 officers. Everybody has a different personality. There are no big underlying issues in our department at all. I think with me going forward, I know the people within the department. I know how the department works. It's going to be a transition. I'm not going to say an easy transition at all. It's going to be a transition, and I think that I'll be well received by all the officers, dispatchers, and staff.
Good. Sorry. Any other follow-ups to Mr. Glaby's question, or any additional points, or?
I'm going to follow up to that last question. Sergeant, at two different points in your response to the last question of why we should pick you, said there's so much more that we can be doing for them, the community. And you said you're going to bring fresh new ideas. With the existing budgetary constraints, what more can we be doing for the community that you want to bring? And I want you to focus on that budgetary constraint, because it's easy right now to say, oh, we'll add, 2 more school resource officers, but that
Totally
that doesn't
understand what you're
solve other problems.
Right, and I've done it on a small basis on my shift alone. Getting my officers out of the car, getting the officers from my shift, meeting and greeting people. I think more of that can be done. I think more of bringing the businesses together which we know there's businesses that are flourishing in town. I don't know them. I don't know the new businesses, and I should. My officers should know. The new bank, the new managers of the bank, we should know them on a first-name basis. That stuff can be done on shift, where you park your car out front and you go in and you foster that relationship, because I don't think that we're doing enough of that right now. And shame on me for not forcing that. But I'm doing the best I can on my shift to make sure that that happens. mentoring the newer officers, listening to the newer officers' ideas. They have some great ideas. Just have to open them up and get them to have some buy-in to our department. And sometimes it's not the easiest. So I think if we open it up, listen to their ideas. I'm not 21 anymore. I'm 45. The 21-year-olds, the 25-year-olds have different ideas coming out of the police academy that they learned, that maybe we need to listen to them to see what they have to offer.
So what's one idea that you've heard in the last, I don't know, let's pick a time frame, last year that you think is valuable and viable that we should consider implementing?
One of the officers was talking about geographical policing. I know how to get myself around a computer, but taking the map on itself and finding out what roads have the highest accident rates, and how are we going to curb those accident rates? Can we figure out the speeds, the times, through different computer programs that they have at their fingertips? Absolutely. Is it something that I didn't think of? Yeah, it's something I didn't think of. We have another officer who, when we talk about computers, he threw this at me the other day, and I kind of chuckled. But he said, you know, we're not going to have any bank robberies in town. I said, why is that? He said, it's easier for someone to sit behind a computer and steal your identity and get thousands of dollars than it is to have them run inside a bank with a shotgun and rob it. And I sat back and I thought about that, and I'm like, he makes complete sense with that. So how do we work on cyber crimes? Do we need to get better at cyber crimes? Do we need to get more training for the officers? Is it training that we can host at the police station to get free classes? We have a beautiful community room. Can we utilize that a little more? Offer these classes up so that people in our department can get this training? I don't know the answer, but am I going to try to get the answer? Absolutely. Thanks, Jason.
Any additional questions as we start to wrap here, or?
Fine.
Good.
Well, we don't have anything for you. Do you have anything for us?
I do.
Closing statements?
I do. I just kind of give you a little bullet point of why Matt Pinard, in my little snapshot of my resume. But before I do that, I want to thank every single one of you for giving me the opportunity to be here today. This was by far one of the toughest executive level processes I have ever been through. And I know some of you sat in on the assessment center that was run, and it was very tough. It was probably one of the toughest things that I've gone through in my law enforcement career. I'm very proud of to where I am today, and no matter what choice you come up with tonight, I'm still going to go to work tomorrow. I'm still going to know that I did a great job for the last 16 years here in Littleton. And the only reason I know that is because I've had a public outcry of support for me today. And like I said earlier, that makes me feel great. And I hope that if I do get the job tonight, that I will be able to be that leader for the people that have reached out to me and talked to me today. So, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
That data stuff he's talking about reminded me of the things we were thinking about. It's like,
Yeah.
you know what, there's an application with the police department.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you all for coming. For me.
That kind of meeting.
I just heard that.
Public displays, come on. All right, well, we do have one more candidate. And Anthony, before you go to get the second candidate, I just, does anybody want just a couple minutes to kind of gather your thoughts, to take some notes, to kind of call your notes, or you
Take my
want?
painkillers.
Yeah, we need a bathroom break, yeah.
All right, so we'll do a little
I don't want to be popping
5-minute
pills
bio
on
break,
camera.
and then we'll bring the second candidate in. So if anybody needs to use the restroom, if you go through the multi-purpose room, there's restrooms in the multi-purpose room. So we'll reconvene at, in about 5 minutes. What do you think?
I don't have anything to talk about, but we can ask the other members.
I just didn't know if people wanted just to kind of like Chase's scribbling
Right.
colors.
Chase is writing feverishly.
It's color coded.
It is color-coded.
Really?
I used to do my planner, my daily.
It helps me find things. It's not even that like red means something. It's that I remember I wrote a red note over here. Which note was the red note, that I want to
good
pay attention
idea.
to.
I used to use the flares.
Chase.
Right, I mean, I got a
It's
long way to go
color-coded.
to reach
It's
that
color-coded.
level.
It's color coded, yeah.
Right?
That's, yeah, the spaghetti sauce, this blood.
See you. Good to see you. You look great. Thank you very much.
Oh, the other thing, I mean, I would be lost without this book. I mean, this is every.
Book of Mormons.
I know. Chase. Little side thing you got going on?
I wish.
He's evangelizing.
Yeah. If it was that book, we would have one page, and it would probably mostly blank.
Could go for coffee right now.
What brought that on?
Kinder, gentler, chief.
Oh, I want some of that. Anthony, can you grab me that hand sanitizer? Actually,
You're gonna share your hand sanitizer?
my hands feel icky. Ted, I know. Next time.
Is that a burner or a birthmark? Not on the rest?
Sauce?
Back.
Ouch. Thank you.
I got about 50 minutes in. My left leg was on fire.
That's terrible. Oh, great, thanks.
Is everybody comfortable with the same questions? Just do it the same way?
Yeah.
How do we do that? So number one is Chuck.
Really need coffee. And it's bad because I think today's Friday.
Wilson had coffee.
No, of course he does. GW didn't hook me up. Actually, I should send him
Send
up
him
to
now,
the room.
I know.
As he comes down with a tray of coffee. That'd be funny.
It's his Duncan's run.
I know. Diane's dropping the ball. She needs trays.
Dewey Cheatham and how? John Kelly. Nice to meet you, Anthony. Heard a lot about you. Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Heard he has a lot of time.
At number 9, right? Yeah, Paul at number 10. So what I meant to do is hold Paul off on that 10th question.
Oh, and then ask the clues.
Hey,
Oh, and then ask out loud.
At the end, yeah. Just, he wrapped himself, so.
Yeah.
get out at 5. Okay. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna read yours. Oh, good.
How's your back holding up? I saw it. No, I saw when you.
Yeah, because I think we can find someone.
I was like, oh, he's gonna get up and leave. That doesn't play well.
Yeah. Even if we get it down. We can
Great
get it
follow
under
up.
10, that's
Great
what
follow
we're
up questions, you guys.
Yeah, that would be good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm
My
a
head?
proud man.
As big as always.
There should be a proud man.
All right, get good up? What's tomorrow, Thursday?
Couldn't do
Yeah,
it
because
today.
I can't get there till 5:30.
Social media in particular.
Right, okay.
Stay up late for
Thanks for doing all that.
all weekend.
It's not helpful.
How do you get away with that?
I have to use it for real estate, so I'm on it. But I stay away from certain pages that used to get me so aggravated and get me upset. They finally said, "Why go on it anymore?"
Right. Call me if you want to talk to me. Yeah. No, I hear it. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it presents a false perception of what collectively the town might be thinking. Sometimes you get 10 people who yell into the void the loudest, and the perception is that is collectively what everyone thinks. And I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah, right. I mean, that's actually a strategy, right? You throw a red herring in there and let everybody fight over that and go, oh, well, it lost. Right, right. And Dave Garland is slick. And you gotta be. I mean, my first couple go-rounds with Dave, it was like, oh, okay, I can work with this guy. And then it was like, whoa, time out. The fields are a little rougher around the edges, but I usually know where they actually stand. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear it. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's a good distraction. Yeah, which one is it? Yeah, it certainly helps when we're dealing with these big projects. Everybody's pushing or pulling in the same direction.
And I think that, but I think
Anna's gonna be great. Yeah, right. And I mean, she's so engaged already. Like day one, she's ready to rock and Oh, my car's locked.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah. Like 2 more minutes. Worst case scenario, give it to, like, just drop it by Anthony. Yeah.
Say, think quick.
Get in line for throwing and stuff. So.
My wife said she would go with me.
There's different colored pens and everything. I suppose this isn't a bad idea. I should have thought of that.
Give credit where credit's due. Those questions are prompting the right kind of response. I hope the next one goes as well, as far as drawing them out,
Yeah. Yeah, right. Tell me story. You know, I can read your resume. What did you do? What are you gonna do? You know,
You're great with the follow-ups.
kick me if I'm getting in the way.
Say what I want to say, you just say it better.
All flash, no bang. Thank you. Thank you very much. Did you bring the kids too?
No, they're going back to work.
How was the tour of the fire station? Yeah? Who was leading it? Do you know? Okay. The Girl Scouts went over to the fire station tonight to do a tour of the fire station.
You beat me, I haven't been there
I know,
yet.
that's what I said to my kids. I said, you gotta tell me how it is.
And so like they all rushed out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they squirted the hose. They let them climb in the trucks. It was really well done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, I mean,
Oh, the fire
it's a
station?
month old, it
I had
damn
a
well better
tour.
be beautiful.
There, the girls.
Oh, cute. Yeah, we had a LCAA meeting there, and then we got a tour. And I was like, oh my God, the kids must love it. And you said when the doors are up and the kids are over, they park, they all come over. Oh, really? Oh my God. Yeah, it's awesome. It is, it really is. I was impressed. Yeah. And that garage with all the trucks and all the vehicles and it's like, yeah. No, they did real, I was impressed. I was, I know, yeah. Fun. Thank you. When he said to me, "Oh, you're smirking about his answer," I was smirking because I was thinking of you. I was thinking of the other night. I was just like, "Oh my God." Robert's like, "You were out of control last night." That Saturday. He's like, he goes, "I told you not to have that much." Let me throw some rock.
That's okay. I just.
No, he's like, I told you not to have that martini. It was the best martini ever. Now I know that I told him. Probably stuffed all, but he goes, and then he had to do the fireball shot, and I go, we did a shot? Yes. And he's like, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, God. As usual. That was so much fun. You're always right. Totally laughed. Yeah.
That's good.
He's like, what's the point? I'm like, they're coming back, right? Good.
Hi, I'm Stacey Jackson. Nice to meet you. Yes. Isn't that too much? I had no idea that was you. Well, you cleaned up.
Right?
I don't want to go to bed.
No, I'm like,
That was the first game.
Yeah, my daughter used to play.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got plenty of time. By the time they get this mob organized, another 10 minutes. Chuck, always right here.
Yeah, that's nice. So, Chuck, I live over in Mattawacket. Oh my God. You're a trainer. So Janice? Oh, for God's sake. I told Chuck Rock. We love them. We love all of them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the Laremonts and the trainers are always...
So Janice's mom, my mother's dad were brother and sister. They were adopted. So it was, yeah, it was kind of a cool story.
Yeah.
It's very sketchy because
Oh, geez, 6 degrees of separation,
right?
right?
It's like Kevin Bacon.
Well, thanks for telling us where it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely wasn't at the softball.
hi.
hey, any thoughts, questions, follow-ups that maybe we could have or should have missed? Shouldn't have missed?
I had to Did we miss anything important here?
I guess, yeah.
Oh, I thought the last question should be saved.
Chuck and I already talked about
That's
that,
a
yeah.
drop the mic question, so
Right.
I thought that anything you guys had should have to come after question 9 or.
Right, so, yeah, maybe,
Yeah, Chuck already mentioned holding question 10 until,
everybody's
okay.
exhausted, anything
Go.
else? Yeah, that's,
All right, here's your last one.
Yeah, do the other questions, and then you can hit us.
or however you want to do it's fine with
That
me.
last one, right?
You know who was good for follow-up questions in a very, very quiet way? It was Kelly Frenchie on that screening committee. He'd sit back just like this and very,
I think Anthony went to get him.
very quietly. It wasn't like he was butting in. It was his turn. It was just, could you expand on
I think he's doing Jameson sometimes
Sometimes those are the hardest, the wide open.
without us.
Right, exactly.
It's amazing to me. It's always amazing to me what people say in interviews sometimes, if you give them the lettuce.
Yeah, sometimes your follow-up questions are good because it actually draws out
It's the shape of the Jameson ball.
a better answer than they originally gave. And
Matt did that a couple of times. I asked a question, thought, why the hell did you say that the first
I
time?
mean, that's what I'm saying. It was almost like he was saying, thanks for asking, because I forgot to say it.
And we own a car, yeah, or like
Here.
here, I know. Isn't it nice?
No, he's from Florida. All right. Kirby, we're good. Can you turn us on, please? Thank you.
Yeah, Ron.
Yeah, Kirby just.
Oh, we on?
See you again.
Nice to see you again. Chase Kirby.
John Cedar.
John, can we see you? Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, John Santoro is our next candidate. John is the deputy chief at Framingham State University, and he is our second candidate. So, John, before we get started, I just have some notes and kind of just some guidelines, I guess, if you will, or rules of the game. Excuse me. So, the way it's going to work is we're going to ask you a series of questions. We've got about 10 prepared questions. We'll go through them. I'll ask the first one, kind of an introductory question, and then we'll just go down the line in turn. And after each question, after you've had an opportunity to answer each question, we'll have an opportunity to ask you any follow-up questions, I mean, that are germane to the question, or, just to follow on with the subject matter. Let's see. The other thing that I've asked for the other candidate, you're one of the two finalists.
Sure.
You went through a very grueling process, and we appreciate all that were involved in that process, not the least of which is yourself and Matthew Pinard. We are hopeful that after the interviews tonight, we'll be able to have some deliberation, have some discussion, and select our next police chief. With that, there's going to be a number one and there's going to be a number two.
Sure.
With the number one candidate, the candidate that we choose to move on and hopefully appoint, we do have a process to follow. So there is background checks and contract negotiations, those kinds of things. What we are asking is for a commitment out of each of the candidates that if selected as the number two candidate and things don't work out with the number one candidate, that you would still be committed to being the police chief in Littleton,
Great.
if that were the way it played out.
Always good to have a backup contingency plan. This line.
Absolutely. All right, so I don't think I missed anything. Did I try to keep us on par here? All right, so I'll get us started. I'd like you to take about 3 minutes to briefly introduce yourself and explain your motivation for applying for the position of police chief in Littleton. And essentially just looking for what brings you here today.
Sure, beyond my resume and cover letter that you have.
Absolutely, we do have all that. Thank you.
Excellent. So, first off, again, I want to thank you for inviting me here. It's a very humbling and honorable experience to be chosen out of, I think I heard at the meeting, 41 or so candidates, and to be one of the final two is really great. It was a long process, and I think it was a good process, the reason why it's long, and you want to make sure you find the best candidate for the town of Littleton and for the Littleton Police Department. So I really, I appreciate all that, and I appreciate being here today. So I'll let you know that my commitment to be a police chief has started long ago. As you see from my resume, I've been a police officer close to 30 years. When I first became a police officer and learned about how it all works and about the command structure, I said, someday I want to be the police chief. And I worked everything I could do to become a police chief. I got as much training as I could get. I got an education as far as I could go with a master's degree, and I got as much experience as possible. Sometimes some of that took some sacrifices to make. Nights out at night school, days, weekends, and everything. It was a big commitment. The other commitment I made, and a big commitment, and folks may look at this and think about it on my resume, is that I served for Methuen PD, as you see, for 20 years. And it's a long time. I was one of the top senior people at the police department. I was there. I was committed to the department. But I had an opportunity to apply at Framingham State University as a deputy chief. And I took that opportunity to apply because it would just help better my chances to my ultimate goal of becoming a police chief, whether it was there at Framingham State University or another police department. So I had to make the sacrifice. I gave up 20 years. I gave up Group 4 retirement. I gave up more pay and more time, and 7, 8, 9, 10-minute commute from work to home to drive close to an hour out to Framingham, not including the traffic. So I made that commitment. It was a big sacrifice I made, but for my ultimate goal is to be a police chief somewhere. So what I did is I continued to search and continue to train and continue to educate myself as much as possible. And then back in October, I think it was, I read the article that Chief King was going to be retiring. And I said, well, let me do some research on the town of Littleton. I knew a little bit about the town. One of your former officers was one of my instructors in the police academy a long time ago. But I knew a little bit about the town, and I said, well, let me learn more about the town. And what I did research, as any good police officer, detective, or investigator would do. I did research. And some of that research was reading articles, internet stories, and of course, watching virtual selectmen meetings every other week.
Sorry.
It's entertaining. No Monday night football. So every other Monday night, I was watching selectmen meetings. And I learned about the issues that go on in the community, how you folks as leaders deal with those issues in the community, what the residents have to say about the community. And I learned as much as I could. I didn't want to come here in person to be a little out of place. I know a lot of people here are regular people that attend some of the meetings, and you'd see me and say, who's that guy? What is he doing? Is he spying on us or anything? So I attended all those meetings virtually. But then I also embedded myself in the community. I came here several evenings after work. I'd come here, drive through your neighborhoods, drive through your roadways and streets, learn what I could about the area, spent time up at Long Lake. I took my wife up to, did some shopping at the Point and other businesses here in town. We went to many restaurants. I attended religious services here in town 3 times already with my wife, and really to get a feel of what the community is all about. And I got to tell you, all that time, those 6 months of work or 5 months or so work of learning about the town of Littleton, I've really grown to love the town and grow a great appreciation for it.
Excellent.
So,
Any follow-ups, my colleagues?
No.
Believe it or not, I actually have.
Chase has? Really?
I'm surprised. So you said you've had a long-running goal to be a police chief,
yes.
but why? Why become a police chief? What about becoming a police chief makes it such a goal for you that you've worked so hard to drive at it?
Sure. So there's a few things. Well, one of the things, of course, is I wanted to be a leader. I want to impart what I know and what I've learned and what I've experienced onto others. I wanted to lead a department and to do that successfully. I think it's sort of in my blood or in my family. My great-grandfather was a police commissioner for the island of Sicily back many years ago. My dad was a part-time police officer as well, but it was in my blood. My great-grandfather was a leader in a police agency, and so I wanted to lead. And here I am as a deputy chief, second in command, and I do lead where I am now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any follow-ups? Okay, thank you. Joe? excuse me.
Early on in your career, what mistake did you make that you learned the most from that has influenced your career today?
Well, I tried to think of what mistakes, really call them learning opportunities, and keep a positive spin on it, as opposed to calling it a mistake, which is a little bit more negative connotation to it. So, through the years, especially in 30 years, there's a lot of things that to go right or wrong, or things you wish you could do over again. But one in particular I can use, in the past I've used an example, but I'll use a new example, is that I would say early in my career, I pulled a vehicle over. I'll give it a whole story. I pulled a vehicle over. Operator had a suspended license, and I called the information. And 2 police officers came to back me up, and they said, "Hey, John, if you could do us a favor, could you cut that guy a break? He's influential to us. He provided us with some information on a good lead on something, and could you cut him a break?" And I said, "All right, well, I'll think about it. I'll let you know." And they went on their way. And then through a little bit of time, I decided that for whatever reason, it's been a long time ago, about 25 plus years ago, I decided to arrest that person for operating out the suspended, and I arrested him, took him down to the police station, and booked him. As soon as I got there, the 2 officers were there, and they laid right into me. They said, "What did you do? Why did you have to arrest that guy? We told you that we wanted a break. We told you we wanted, he helped us out with an investigation. You really went behind us, and you went against us." And so they gave me a hard time about it, and I thought long and hard about it. I said, "Well, that's officer discretion. Officers have the right, the ability to make discretionary calls and decide. I could have let the guy go. I could have summoned him. I could have arrested him, and I chose to arrest him. But then I thought long and hard about it, and I realized that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. There was no need necessarily to arrest him. I could have done other things, or I could have worked it out with some other way." And so it taught me a lesson about police discretion. And in turn, I'm able to pass that on to others. And so I've been a field training officer. I've trained many officers over my years as a police officer in different ranks. And I use that analogy and that story a little bit when I train the other officers and talk about officer discretion about things. So I use that as a learning thing.
Is there a time that, I don't know how to phrase this, is there a time that it is a time to arrest as opposed to, I don't want to say cutting a break, but there's a lot of reasons someone could have to say that the arrest is not needed, but is there a point that you say this has to be an arrest because?
Yes, usually to eliminate further problems, to keep the situation safe, to eliminate things happening later on. I can't honestly say to you right now what the reason was back 25 years ago as a young officer for that particular incident, but there are times that you need to make an arrest beyond the fact that what's mandated in the state law, for violation of a domestic violence order. But there are times that you need to intercede and keep the threat from happening by making an arrest. There's lots of other reasons as well, but
Thanks.
sure.
So
Go ahead,
I appreciate your attention to detail to the early on in the career part.
Okay.
But let's change it up a little bit. As a leader in one of your various positions, can you tell me about a mistake that you made in a leadership role that you've learned something from or taken something away from that's influenced your career?
Sure. A little bit on a similar story is of giving someone a break. An officer, and I don't want to get too much into details because who knows who's watching where. An officer did something, and actually it was a supervisor who did something, and I sort of let it go and just made a mental note of it, or I wrote it down, and I kept note of it. And instead of addressing it right away, it wasn't anything fatal, it was nothing major, but it ended up being something that repeatedly happened later on. And so I said, well, maybe if I intervened earlier, it was nothing detrimental, but then it had to be addressed later on down the line.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other follow-ups?
No need to follow up after Chase, he's got it.
It's not usually my role to fill the void of noise here. It's usually these guys.
I'm medicated, I think excuse.
Is this thing on?
Does he get a ride home?
All right, Chase, I think you're up.
Yep, I'm up. Believe it or not, I get to talk again.
Does he get to ask his own follow-up
Deputy-
question?
Deputy Chief, so
Yes.
what tools and/or training is or has been most beneficial to your preparation for the role of Chief of Police?
Tools for preparation. I got to say, probably the most, without a doubt, most important thing is leadership experience. particularly at the executive level, leadership experience. I think without having leadership experience, even if you had training, even if you have education, without that experience, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to succeed without having some experience, especially at that level. I'd probably say that's one of the top things. And as I just slightly mentioned, was one of the other tools is leadership training. I've attended FBI leader program for that was 3 weeks. Out in Worcester, I spent their training for leadership with those folks. I also attended a 10-session program with MPI out in Grafton, Mass, with the Mass Police Institute, Municipal Police Institute at the Mass Chiefs Association headquarters, and I had that training as well. And of course, I have a master's degree, as you see on my resume, in criminal justice administration. I think that those 3 things are really valuable tools to become an effective leader and to really get me to this point where I am today. But again, probably the most important is experience. You just can't walk into the role and expect to do the job day one.
So if that's so vital, part of your role as a deputy chief, and certainly what we would expect of you, is to develop new leaders. in
Yes,
the department.
absolutely.
So if you consider that to be so important, tell me what you've done recently in your current position to help develop young leaders, or leadership skills in your younger staff.
Sure. And so some of the things we do is, and it's great at our place because we have tuition reimbursement and tuition waivers, we encourage our officers, sergeants, or even civilian personnel to apply for the degree and go for the degree. We recently had a sergeant, within the past year, finish her master's degree, another sergeant last year to finish his master's degree, someone in an administrative role. He's gotten 2 masters out of the university. So we're always, and it's not just my setting that it's education. I think education is hugely important. But we encourage our officers to get an education. We encourage our officers to go to training. We offer lots of training, as much as we can afford, both in time and money to send them to. And being a role model for the others and providing advice and guidance. And sometimes we talk about life stories or things that are happening outside of the police world to guide people to get a really good feeling on what's going on and to inspire them. We give them the tools, we inspire them and empower them, and what they do with that is up to them, but we try to put them in the right path.
I'm gonna follow up to the, just the tools and training portion of this and it being beneficial. So you mentioned the FBI training, the MPI training, specific to one of those programs.
Yes.
What specifically, what training, because I know if you're going to 10 sessions of the MPI training,
Yes.
they're keyed on certain things. So what specifically out of one of those, either the FBI or the MPI training, do you feel has been most beneficial to prepare you to become police chief?
Sure, and it goes a little bit back to the gentleman's question of empowering and inspiring others, is learning how to manage, how to supervise, and how to lead millennials. It's a lot different way of policing in getting the right buy-in for those who started back sometime when I did versus the newer generation officers. So that, we could spend a lot of time talking about that. But just an overall thing is leading, guiding, supervising millennials is one of the biggest things. And that continues to go at all 3 levels of that training. There was a supervisory level, executive level, and command level. All 3 of those FBI leader classes talked about that with millennials.
Is there a significant difference in managing, supervising, guiding, leading millennials?
Absolutely. If you have a veteran officer who's versus a newer officer, it's different what generation they're from. Yes, absolutely. I have millennials at home. Parenting millennials is different, too.
Okay.
I have a follow-up that, well, I could make it here, but it would be a stretch, but maybe I'll wait until between questions 9 and 10 as a standalone. How's that? Sounds like
Make a note of it.
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
We will hear from Mr. Glavy.
Ready?
All right, Cindy.
Okay, you'd be coming into a new department with new staff, new administration, et cetera. What challenges do you see in your transition to chief of police in Littleton, and how will you address them?
Some of the challenge would be being the new guy on a block in learning. It's a whole new learning curve of learning a new department. But I'm not worried about that. I'm not concerned about that because I have the experience of that. When I went from Methuen to Framingham State, I was the new guy. I think I may have mentioned there was 68 candidates. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I'm sorry, because between all the interviews, but there were about 68 or 70 candidates for the deputy chief's position that I applied for. I made it down from 68 to number 1, and I got the position. So I was the new guy, I was the outsider. There were internal candidates from what I understand, and I was the new guy coming in. I had to learn everything about that department in a very short amount of time. I learned the climate, the culture, the temperature of the department, policies and procedures department, key players with the university's government, if you will, board of trustees, university's administration, just like you folks would be in an equivalency over there. I had to get all that, and I was the new guy in, and I had to learn all that, and I think I did a pretty good job at it. I adapted pretty quickly. Right away, I was on committees. Right away, I was on subcommittees. Right away, I was involved with things, and things happened rather quickly, and I was able to adapt to that.
Okay, great.
So I'm sorry, the second part of your question was a very good question.
How will you address them in your role if you come
Sure.
to Littleton?
So coming here, one of the first things I'd have to do is develop a transitional plan, and we did some of that with the assessment center, for those who were able to sit there and watch. So you have to develop a transitional plan, or transition plan, I should say, of coming in, and I'd have to do the same things. I'd have to come in, I'd meet with the outgoing chief if it's possible, spend some time with him and learn as much as I can from him. I'd meet with the deputy chief, I'd meet with the sergeants, I'd meet with the patrolman, even the department's administration. I'd meet with everybody within the department to learn, again, as I said earlier, learning the temperature, the culture, the climate within the department, set some goals and objectives, short term and a little bit longer term. I'd meet with town officials such as the selectman, administrator, assistant administrator. I'd meet with as many people as possible. I'd meet with business owners and key places, faith-based leaders, and continue to work with them and meet with them on a regular basis and find out what their goals are, how the police department can help them, and what some of the priorities are. It's a really big picture thing.
Okay, great.
Sure.
And so with respect to that transition plan, the short-term component of that transition plan, what do you think the single most important piece of that successful transition is in the short term? I mean, you laid out a lot of different
Sure.
things we might do, but what I don't have a good sense of is how you would prioritize a finite number of hours in the day in the first, let's say, month to 2 months.
Well, in this role, as a police officer and in the higher role as a police chief, there's no 9 to 5, Monday through Friday job. I live that now, and it's part of the responsibilities and part of what comes with the job. So there wouldn't be a set amount of hours, but I would set up, I'd set up a set of goals for myself in the transition plan when I'm looking at short-term and long-term. Again, short-term would be meeting with all the key players. That would be one of the first things to learn when I can, especially if I'm able to meet with Chief King prior to him leaving. I'd probably spend some time on my own time to come in and meet with him if it doesn't work out for when I would start versus when he would be leaving. But that's probably one of the immediate things, in meeting with the department, deputy chief and sergeants. I'd also have to, part of the whole thing is winning the respect over of the rank and file. I think I did a really good job at that at my current position. I hope to do that well here as well.
Great.
Since you brought it up, is there a strategy that you use to do that, to win over the respect of the rank and file?
My wife's a really good baker, get some cookies and cake and stuff like that. I just lead by example, show them, that I'm an honest and true person. I want them to hold me accountable, and I'll hold them accountable. And I'll be as fair and honest with them as possible.
Okay.
Good IPAs.
To go along with the cookies?
Yes. Just, I mean,
Chocolate stout with
Just throw it
chocolate
out there.
cookies, maybe, I'm not sure.
All right. I think you're up, Mr. Highway.
I'm up, all right. Please provide an example of conflict in a personnel situation with a supervisor or someone you supervised that you ultimately resolved.
See who's in the audience, if there's an example I use in work. So, again, I'll try to limit my information and details of the situation for confidentiality reasons, but it was an officer who had an incident with a firearm at the police station during a conversation with lots of people around in the police station. happened on a weekend. I was notified of the incident, and then I notified the chief that an incident occurred. We immediately started an internal affairs investigation. Part of the investigation was, I don't want to go into all the steps of internal affairs investigation, but I spoke to the complainants, the witnesses, the officer who was involved, including they were with their union attorney at the time. Met with folks from HR, met with the chief, did a complete investigation. At the end of my investigation, I did a summary of the report. I did some recommendations in a report, and I met with the chief. We devised a corrective action and disciplinary plan, which included some unpaid time off, a fitness for duty exam, and some retraining. When the officer came back, we monitored the officer through over a couple of weeks to make sure things were going well.
And when you had to communicate all of that to this officer,
Yes,
is it safe to assume maybe that didn't go over super well?
that's correct.
So can you talk me through a little bit how that conflict right there, how you address that conflict, the strategies that you use to convey this fairly difficult thing to an officer and the corrective actions that needed to be implemented?
Sure, so some of it I handled and some of it the chief handled, just to let you know. So on my end of it, it was a little tough because we're a small, intimate department, much like here in Littleton. We have 15 sworn and civilian staff and so on. So it's a small department. That officer happened to work day shift when I work, so there was a little bit more tighter bond, if you will, because I see this officer on a regular basis versus a third shift officer I don't see as often. So it was difficult. We're similar in age. We have kids similar in age as well, so it was difficult because in the end, we're all human beings, but I have to do what I have to do for my job, and I have to step into my role and do what I have to do. And I have to be firm, I have to be persuasive, I have to let them know that the seriousness of what happened, and we'll take all the personal stuff away, forget about what we talk about kids in college things, we need to talk about it's business time. Again, it happened a while ago, so I don't know the exact details of the conversation.
That's fine, I
But I mean,
understand.
it isn't an easy thing, but you have to do it for the protection of the department, for the integrity of the department, and you have to do it for the community for which you serve.
Any further follow-up?
No.
I think he's a better officer for it. It ended up being a lesson, and he understands. And he's told me that, not to belabor the question, but I'm just thinking it through, is that he, as much as I'm sure it hurt, but I think he's learned a lot from that. And I think others, we have to keep it confidential, but I mean, people hear what's going on, and I think others learn from it and say, geez, I better not do what so-and-so did. Sends a message.
Okay, so there's a lot of discussion and conversation around community policing. Can you share with us your philosophy on community policing?
Sure, I think community policing is key in any community, no matter the size of New York City or a small Western Massachusetts town with one person who's the chief police officer and does everything all at once. So you have to have community policing. With community policing, you help build trust and legitimacy between the community and the police department. You need to listen to what the community members have to say, involve them in certain decision-making processes, and build their trust and make them feel valued, empower them, give them projects to work on, take their input, take their suggestions, and work through it. Not every suggestion or idea that they want to do is possible. We'd have to explain to them what's possible and what's not possible. But community policing is really key to building relationships, making people feel valued and making people feel important. And they shouldn't just feel important, they should be important. I can give you an analogy, much like I gave at my interview earlier, of a community policing analogy that I read about in a report of the 21st century policing model. And that is that of a three-legged stool, if you will. So if you picture a stool, the three legs on there, you miss any one leg and the stool can't, you know this analogy? Mm-hmm. Any one leg can't stand, but the three legs that we represent in the stool for community policing are police leaders, community leaders, and government leaders. And if you don't have one of those groups involved, one of those groups of leaders involved, you don't have the support from them and the buy-in from them, the stool won't stand and it won't be able to support a strong, vibrant, and healthy community. quiet in here.
You know, I'm just going to jump into the community policing one just a little bit further. So coming into Littleton, you've certainly kind of tried to acclimate yourself based on your testimony, if you will.
Yes.
And, you know, going to services and shopping in the community and driving through neighborhoods and whatnot. What, can you give us just one or two ideas about how, based upon the philosophy that you've presented to us, you would implement community policing
Sure.
in Littleton?
So first, you'd have to do with, you familiar with the SARA principle?
Sarah?
SARA, S-A-R-A.
I'm not.
It's a principle, it's a process you use to recognize and find issues and problems that are going on that may be addressed through community policing. I don't want to bore you with the whole education part of it. One of the things is to scan and find out if there's a problem that needs to be addressed, analyzing a problem, responding to the problem, and then assessing the problem. And analyzing and assessing. So you need to find, I don't want to hypothetically make up an issue that I don't necessarily know what's going on in the community beyond what I may have learned here or there, but I would just hypothetically say, if there's an issue at the Loop, at the Point, because where I worked in Methuen, there was a shopping plaza called the Loop. The Loop has a movie theater, if you're familiar with it, and retail, restaurant, same makeup, but it's straight and flat versus built into the hill. So there was a problem particularly on Friday nights of high school students and high schoolers from both in Methuen and the surrounding communities, hanging out, causing trouble, mischief sometimes, just being loud and noisy, sometimes violating some laws. But there was a problem there. And so the department addressed the issue. We looked into it. And what we needed to do was to work with the store shop owners over there to see what their needs were and see what their concerns were, develop a plan, and with each of those businesses, I can't remember, 25 or so businesses that were there, work with them, because one store may have no issues, or another store may have issues such as like Stop and Shop was having shoplifting, particularly up the candy aisle. Everybody getting candy go before the movies, and then some other aisle, and makeup aisle. And so we had to work with those business owners or business managers to find out what the issues were, figure out a game plan of what to do. So hypothetically, if this same issue may or may not be happening over the Point, you'd have to work with the business owners over there, the property management company, the police department, and work together to come up with a solution. But it's hypothetical, I'm not saying you have a problem there, so.
In that story, one of the entities that you left out were the kids themselves.
Sure.
So let's run with your hypothetical for a minute.
Sure.
How are you going to engage those kids in that hypothetical in a way that is likely to resolve the root cause of the problem? Because the shoplifting is not the root cause, right? The root cause is something much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
So within a community policing construct, how do you go after those kids? Go after sounds combative. I
Right.
don't mean that.
Sure.
How do you engage those kids in a way that ultimately goes at that root?
Well, one of the things, and you have an SRO here, a school resource officer, is to reach out with the school resource officer and see if he already has a pre-established relationship with the students, in a good bond with them, be able to work with them and talk with them and work something out with them and see what the underlying problems are, give them some alternatives of what to do. You know, it's a big process to go through, but
Start with the SRO.
that's one of the things you could do, sure. It's the school officials as well, find out what's going on. Again, I'm sure that hypothetically that it wouldn't be just Littleton students, it would be folks from other communities, Westford, Air, and some other communities around.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did I miss it? Did you explain the Sarah principle? Did I?
Scan, analyze,
Okay.
respond, and assess.
All right, all right.
It's going to be a quiz on this.
Yeah.
What strategies do your officers use to engage with the students on campus at Framingham State?
What do our officers do to engage?
Yeah, what, do they have specific strategies or?
We empower the officers to do their own thing. We don't necessarily tell them, we want you to go out and do this. If they're out there to make friends, to build relationships, we let them go out and do, we say, you go out and cover an area, we tell them to go out and walk around, we tell them to engage. We don't tell them specifically, this is how we want you to do it.
Okay.
So they're free to do it
They
on their
get
own.
out of their vehicles, they get on foot, they're out and about, visible.
Yeah, we have bike patrol officers. When there's sufficient staffing, we have foot patrol officers. Our officers work details, they work events. and they get to know people. They walk around. I'm in a process of developing a liaison program between different groups on campus. I'm the liaison of several groups on campus where I want to get our officers involved. And one of them I've been talking about, one of our new hire officers was a football player in high school, football player in college, and I think it'd be a really good fit to be the liaison between the police department and the football team and the police department and the athletics department in general. Because he has that bond, he has that common conversation that could go on. If you send somebody who knows nothing about football or sports, you probably wouldn't be a good fit for sending them over there. So I talked to him a little bit about it, and he says that he is really interested in doing something like that. We haven't developed the whole program. It's in a concept stage right now, but we've been talking about that with him and others. And we did have some other officers liaise to other groups on campus as well in the past. This is something we're working on.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Knox?
If you discovered that one of your officers had a personal bias that you thought would hinder their judgment, how would you address that matter?
Well, one of the things is that everybody has implicit bias on things. I mean, just something that happens after birth. I mean, whether you decide to like something or not like something, you like chocolate ice cream, you don't like vanilla ice cream, you don't like motorcycles, you like cars. I mean, everybody has implicit bias on something. It's to what extreme it is and to how it affects your life on a day-to-day basis, how it affects your work, or in this case, your police work. So one of the things you need to do is to identify it, to address it, and to assess it. And you work with the officer, and, it depends on what the situation is. We've assigned it to a supervisor to work with that officer and say, listen, there's been an issue. We've come to realize that maybe you have a implicit bias or bias towards, I don't know, again, we'll go with a hypothetical, get along well with youth. I don't know, I'm just making this completely up. You wouldn't want that, going back to what I just said about the liaison program, you wouldn't want that officer necessarily be your SRO. You wouldn't want him to be your youth officer. You'd keep him to an area where he would, keep him out of areas where he wouldn't do well. But what you need to do is have that sergeant or supervisor work with the officer, find out what the underlying issues are, finding out what the bias is, and working through that with them. If that takes retraining, it may take retraining, but just identifying and knowing that you have a bias in itself really helps you deal with it. So if I know that I don't like Poland Springs water, well then, I'm not going to work with Poland Springs water. But when if I have to work with Poland Springs water, knowing that I have a bias towards it, I'll be ahead of time, know that, realize it, and do everything I can to treat this Poland Springs water fair and equitable like I would with everybody else, knowing that I have the bias. Just knowing that you have a bias is going to help you work through it.
Can I ratchet it up a little bit?
Yes.
Rather than
Oh.
using Poland Springs water,
I
if you
didn't
identified
out anybody.
one of your officers had a bias, I'd say it was a diversity bias, it was didn't like people of color, or didn't like didn't like Democrats or Republicans or homosexuality, or if there was a specific bias for a protected class.
I don't think Democrats and Republicans are.
Yeah.
Thank God. But, I mean, pick
Yes,
one.
I understand.
mean, just, because it's real. It should very, very easily happen, and I appreciate the fact that there are implied implicit biases, but if you did identify that there was an officer, Littleton Police Department, that you're seeing a bias, that, maybe they're being accused of profiling, or whatever the case may be, how would you address that?
Sure. So again, one of the things is you can't force somebody to like something. So you have to be knowledgeable of that. You have to know that. But again, if it's that severe, if it's that detrimental, you'll need to send an officer to training, some sensitivity training, some bias training. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to continue my answer and with a little bit of history and background of me, again, whether you read that in my cover letter and resume, is that soon after I was hired, the police department, when the police chief hired me, he liked the fact that I was an outside candidate, because he knew that I was a fresh set of eyes to look at the police department. He says, I want you to look at this police department with a fresh set of eyes. I want you to be critical. I want you to look at it. I think this summer, he'll be there 30 years, the police chief, not always as the chief. He started off as a patrolman, worked his way up, but he's been there for 30 years. So he already has his way of doing things in the way things are done on a regular basis. So what happens is you become numb, if you will. You don't see things that are going on. So the chief says, listen, I've been here a long time. We've done things a lot of ways. I want you to be critical. I want you to look at what's going on here at the police department and let us know. So I did that. That was my task, and that's what he told me to do, and that's what I did. One of the things I noticed was the fact that it looked like there was some sort of lack of diversity training for our officers. And I'm very much involved with diversity, and it's something that is near and dear to me. So what I did is I said, Chief, I said, I think there's, I don't want to take this too long for this answer, but I said, Chief, I really think that our officers need some training. So he said, you know, look into it. I looked into it. I found someone that I knew to come in and train our officers. They did 2 1/2-day trainings, half the department one day, half the department any other day, and they got some diversity training. We even brought in the legal counsel for the university. She sat in on the program. She got engaged with the program, and she seemed to enjoy the program. And I think our officers had a lot of eye-opening experiences going on there. They never had that type of training before, and I think they realized and recognized some of their biases, because that was part of the training, was to realize, yes, I don't like chocolate chip cookies or whatever it is. And so we learned things about each other. I think they learned about ourselves first, and then you learned something about this gentleman, and he learned something about you. So we learned those things, and we then learned how to deal with those things in a diversity level. And then, again, I served a 1-year term as a co-chair on the Diversity of Inclusion, Committee on Diversity and Inclusion at the university. And in that role, I was able to work with some diversity initiatives within the university, including bringing our stuff back to our police department and sending our officers out for more training. I also brought in a company this past December called Wright Academy out of Florida. They specialize in racial intelligence training. We had some issues going on campus, some issues going on with our officers. And we brought the company in. It's a really long story, but I'm going to shorten it, that we brought them in, and they provided some diversity training and some racial intelligence, social intelligence, and emotional intelligence training to our officers. And we opened it up to the whole university community of employees. We also opened it up to outside police departments as well. And I think it's really key to have those an outsider in with a fresh set of eyes looking at things. And if I have time, I have another analogy to give you, or another recent story.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Sure. So one of my other things I do when I'm not working, in my spare time, is I'm the vice chair of a board of directors for a fairly good-sized credit union, $24 million in assets. I've been serving on that board for about 20 years. We recently acquired a new CEO manager for our credit union. And prior to that, our CEO that was there for 30-plus years, close to 40 years. Much like I said with the chief saying that he needed a fresh set of eyes, this gentleman was a fresh set of eyes for the credit union. We just did his evaluation 2 weeks ago. And one of the things we realized is that he was providing us with reports that we weren't used to. And we said, Mike, why don't you give us these reports the way Sally used to do them for us? And he says, well, I can if you want, you're my boss, but that's not the right way to do it. And I said, well, really, why isn't it the right ways? And he went through his explanation. And I come to realize, and that happened with reports that we were getting, that happened with other things we were getting. What happened is, people just became numb of the same person, the same insiders being there all the time. The CEO was there for 30-plus years. The employees were there 5, 6, 7. So we have one employee, I think they're 10, 12 years. They got used to everything being rubber stamped all the time, seeing the same old, and they didn't realize something new needed to be done. There was changes in technology. There was changes in procedures, changes in regulations that nobody saw because it was the same eyes looking at things over and over again. He didn't realize there were problems or issues going on.
Thank you.
Sure. So I answered your question, but I put in some stuff that I really want to talk about tonight.
Do you mind if I escalate your
please
question just a touch more? So I appreciate the hypotheticals associated with
Yes.
diversity issues of, cookies and bottled water, but bringing it back to a specific circumstance and escalating from where Chuck took it. talk me through your approach in a scenario where one of your officers is accused of some sort of bias in a policing context. So now it's risen past the level of you've identified it, and now a member of the community, perhaps they were being arrested, and now they've logged some accusation. Talk to me about your approach to investigating that and to addressing that, please.
Sure, so something similar did happen at our PD, that there was one of our officers accused of having a bias or an issue with a person of color. And we, just like we do with the internal investigation that I spoke of earlier, is that we took the information in, took it all serious, spoke to the complainant, spoke to witnesses, spoke to the officer, and again, to shorten the stories, that we sent them for retraining, and part of that was that Wright Academy training that we brought in from outside, and it wasn't necessarily geared just for him, it was for everyone, and we addressed the issue. We said we don't stand for it if in fact he did or didn't do something wrong. I won't get into that here, but we identified it and addressed it and confronted it, and we worked with the complainants and said, listen, this is what we're going to do. An apology was issued to the complainant and the complainant's family, and the officer went for retraining.
And talk to me about engaging that complainant. Do you perceive it to be more effective to have someone from the department engage them or someone external from the department engage them?
So in that particular situation, we had the complainant and the officer meet one-on-one. Sort of what you think of, if you know of what restorative justice, of where the victim meets the perpetrator and tries to work things out that way, to see where each other are coming from, what it feels like to be a victim, what it feels like to be the perpetrator. So that, I guess much like that, not saying that the officer was a perpetrator, but saying that, maybe it worked best that way, that we sat the officer down with that complainant and they were able to talk to each other, one-on-one. That isn't always the case, though. If it's too volatile of a situation, you can't put an officer and a complainant in a room together. You also have to watch out for, union implications and HR-related implications. So you have to take the scenario as it's given and depend on what it's like.
Thank you.
You get the next one. Unless there's any follow-up from,
No.
Money question, budget. Fiscal pressures demand that the community continually strive for greater efficiencies in our operations. Can you articulate for us how you'll balance the fiscal responsibility, finite resources, and diverse set of demands within the town when you're preparing your budgets?
So I have to work within the budget. I understand that the police budget's somewhere around $2 million or so. I'm assuming that of that $2 million, 80 to 85% of it is taken up by personnel costs. So we'll work within the budget with the budget we're given. I'll monitor the budget, probably break it down in quarters and work quarterly with it. I work with the town accountant, Bonnie Fleck, I believe is her name is. So I'll work with the town administrator, the assistant town administrator, and the selectman as well, and anyone who has influence or has part into the budget process, and work with them and stay within the numbers. We'll take, we'll use some data-driven statistics to reallocate resources and services and shift assignments if need be. If we find that Thursday night's the busy night versus a different night's the busy night, we'll work with those numbers. Again, I don't want to get too hypothetical because I don't know what's going on here on the inside there, but we'll reallocate resources and officers and shifts. It's one of the things we can do. We can look for outside funding sources such as grants.
Talk to me a little bit about your experience putting together grants.
Sure, so I've worked.
Successes, failures, the whole story.
So I've worked on several grants over my career. I've worked on several DOJ, Department of Justice grants. One of them was the COPS initiative just last year or so about rehiring or hiring or adding staff to the department. I worked with the grant office on that. I worked on a VAWA grant from DOJ, which is the Women's Violence Act. I also worked with the Ballistic Vest Partnership grant, all with the DOJ. I worked on some grants with MEMA. I've worked on some grants with FEMA. I've worked with some other grants. I've even worked with some small private companies like Firehouse Subs. It's a chain of sub shops. They have grants. We worked with a Target grant, Subway grant. I've worked with various grants. But some of the grants, Again, going back to leadership style and empowering officers, that we, on the smaller grants, the less complicated grants, we've asked some of the officers to get involved with the grant, writing the grant, working with the grant, particularly officers who were in the master's program taking grant writing classes. We said Joe or Steve, or they came to us and say, listen, there's a grant I found in my class, can I work with it? Can I apply statistics and information here at the police department in my grant? And we work with them on that. So we give them a little bit something to do. It helps them with their classes, it helps them with their project, helps with empowering the officers. So I work with all the variety of grants over the years. As grants go, some of them were good, some of them were bad. And the cops hiring grants, it went to nobody with a population less than, a couple 100,000. There were several communities that applied, and very few people got because it was a very limited amount of funds. But there are a lot of grants out there. I worked with several state grants as well. Something somewhat grant-related, somewhat finance-related. As you see, I was emergency management director in the city of Methuen for about 5.5 years. During my 5.5 years, I saw the city through 5 federally declared disasters. In those disasters, I was able to assist the community in the city of Methuen to reclaim over $1 million in reimbursement back from the state and federal government for those 5 federally declared disasters, right back into the community. It was a long, arduous process. I worked with someone in the engineering office and someone in the accounting office. $1 million is no small sum of money.
So if you don't mind, follow that up again. Grants are good, but they're not always a panacea. So talk to me about a time where you had to essentially make the argument that your budget wasn't sufficient. You just imagine you're here, and you have to come to us and say, the budget isn't going to cut it. You're not giving me enough money. Tell me about a time that you've had to make that argument with your administration in your past and how you approached it.
Sure. So I'll use one recent example. Last year, about this time of the year, actually might have been a little even closer into May, the administration said, listen, we have a small sum of money that we'll give to you to a project, pet project that you had. This is something you can turn over in a short amount of time with X amount of dollars that you want to do. I said, perfect. There is all these initiatives, all these ideas that I have. And I went out, and one of the things was we had laptop computers in our cars. We upgraded, wanted to upgrade to ruggedized tablets, brand name Patrol PC. And we were already familiar with the product from trade shows, from other offices using on other departments. Anyways, I quickly made a proposal. I worked with the business office to work on staying within the state guidelines of purchasing. And we put it out to bid. We went through the whole process there, and they gave me a certain amount of money. But in the end, to get the exact thing that we wanted, we were short X amount of dollars. And I said to the VP, I said, we're short some money. And we went back and fought for, it wasn't a lot, it was a couple $1,000. I think we were originally, I'm guessing for numbers, we were given $25,000 or so, and I needed another $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And I went back to him and says, listen, I don't want to just do half the project. I don't want to just do 2 cars, I want to do 5 cars. I don't want to just get this mount, I want to get this mount. I don't want to just get a keyboard, the on-screen keyboard, I want the external keyboard. So I went back and I made an argument for it, and I justified it. And he says, okay, we'll give you a little bit more money, but not too much more money. And they gave me just what I needed to come in at the dollar value of that. So I made a persuasive sales pitch to them. And there are several others that as well, but that's just one of them.
Thank you.
Any follow-ups? Okay, finances, interruption.
Okay, question number 9. What motivates and inspires you to come to work every day?
Working with great people. I'm also motivated by doing the right thing and making sure the right thing is done. Working with interesting people really inspires and motivates me. Seeing others succeed and being proactive and progressive, again, going back to, it's great to see officers wanting to get education. It's great to see officers wanting to be promoted. Even as much as it hurts, it's, an officer sometimes will come to me and says, listen, Deputy, I just want to give you the heads up that I'm applied to Littleton PD to be a police officer. I'm in a process. They're going to maybe contact you for a background investigation. I'm giving you a heads up. I don't get upset about that. I'm sorry to see the officer go, but I'm happy for the officer because the officer feels like they're progressing and going forward. I never hold it against any officer. I've been there for 7 years. I don't know how many officers we've turned over. But I always encourage them and say, that's great for you. I'm happy for you. Anything I can do for you to help you, I think that's great. And so I love the fact that officers are inspired and empowered. I love the fact that officers are out there learning new things, and that makes me happy to come to work every day, to see that they're like that involved. And of course, not every day is a rosy day, and some days officers come in a bad mood or not feeling well or whatever it is. But I really like to see people coming in and trying to do the best that they can do. So those are some things that inspire me to come to work every day.
Thank you.
Any follow-ups to that? Inspiration question, or motivation? No? Okay. You have your insert question?
Yes. Your resume is interesting and unique, I think, in one respect to my eye that I would like to have you expand on. You're currently, 6.5 years in as deputy chief at Framingham State, and then prior to that, 5.5 years, had a FEMA, which in Methuen was, emergency management, which was in Methuen's part of the police department.
Yes.
Okay, here it's not, so I find that, it's interesting, it's kind of it's a hybrid, but probably more associated with fire department, I guess. But that's 12 years in municipal policing, in a community, and I wonder if you're conscious of any differences that either you can bring to the table from those jobs that add something that we wouldn't get from the, traditional patrolman, sergeant, detective, deputy chief, and whether or not you're conscious of, having been away from that kind of department for 12 years, whether there's things you need to focus on.
All right, sure. So for a little bit of clarification, my role as emergency management director for the city of Methuen, I was still a member of the police department. That was just my assignment. We had officers assigned to the schools. That was their assignment. Officers assigned to the cross-border initiative, the CBI, we had officers with the drug task force. My assignment was City Hall and the mayor's office as director of emergency management. I was still a police officer. Still, when I wasn't in that role, worked shifts, worked overtime, worked swaps, worked details. So I was always deeply involved with it. And I worked regularly with the police department, the fire department, and other agencies. So I haven't been out, I've always been in for that portion. So up until I went to Framingham State University, I did leave a municipality, but it's still a community. Whether it's a town on the Cape, Western Massachusetts, New York City PD, where there's 45, 50,000 police officers, you're still in a community protecting and serving those that you're hired to do that for. So at Framingham State, it was 6,000 students, 1,500 faculty and staff. It's just a different ballpark and a different ball team that you're playing on. It's still policing, whether you're in a municipality or you're Northeastern University is a private police agency, you're still a police officer and you're still doing police work. So in my eyes, there's no different ball team, ball game, ball field, and the uniform. It's really the same game you're playing as law enforcement. But the unique perspective, just to add to that, is that, so Methuen was close to 100 police officers, 47,000, 50,000 residents, 26 square miles. It's good size. Framingham State University, main campus, 100 acres, 100 square miles, the other campus, 100 acres, the other campus, 100 acres, but it's very concentrated. Still the same amount of people, it's like here in Littleton, 16 square miles, 9,400 residents, 15 police officers there, 15 police officers where I am now. Again, it's really just the same. It's really just applying that. But the perspective I have in university policing, we seem to deal a little bit more with, we talked about earlier about bias things and issues that go on, and working with millennials on a closer basis, because again, most of your population is in that college age, whereas when you go to a community, it's more diverse of age-wise diversity. So I have that unique perspective to add to it.
I guess just to follow up on that question, 100 acres is a lot different than the the
Sure.
roads and
Yeah.
the infrastructure that you would be responsible for patrolling and overseeing here. So, I mean, with doing certainly 26 square miles is bigger than Littleton. So you've got that experience, but, I mean, how do you see that transition? Or would there be any effect for you? Would that be a challenge for you to be the chief? Because, I mean, being on a college campus with 100 square mile, or 100 acres is a lot different as far as the traffic enforcement and that kind of thing that would be in Littleton with a couple of main thoroughfares going through the community.
Sure, I really think it's easily adaptable. Again, I worked on small departments. As you see in my resume, I've worked on larger departments. I'm very easily adaptable. To me, I don't think there'll be any challenges or any issues. I think I'll be able to take care of that fine. It's still the same, you're still doing the same job. You're doing law enforcement, whether you're in a concentrated neighborhood or a concentrated community versus a larger spread out community. I really think there's no difference. Just allocating the resources, as I said earlier, to where they need to be, putting the right people in the right places, using data to figure out where you need. So, we wouldn't run a radar car on, Town Road that leads into the lake when it's a short road, not maybe necessarily versus a bigger, busier road is King or a Great Road or something like that. But just using the data, using the information you have out there, and sending your resources, sending your officers over there, doing what you need to do. There's really no difference to me.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other follow-ups or additional
I
questions?
have an additional question. Sure. So one of the bullet points that you've got listed on your resume is about recruiting, selecting officers, hiring.
Yes.
Talk me through a little bit of your philosophy. What are you looking for in an entry-level hire, a patrolman right out of the academy, that you think would be valuable to a department like Littleton's? And to you as a...
Sure. Someone who's willing to learn, someone who is eager but not overly eager to do the job, because then you don't want a loose cannon or someone who's overzealous doing something. But I think you just need to find out what the needs are in the community and look at the officer that would best fit those needs. Maybe an officer, Littleton may not fit in Boston, and you can't necessarily may not be able to bring a Boston officer to Littleton. So that's part of the interview process, learning that, set up your guidelines, your matrix, and your standards prior to doing the interview. So when you have the interview panel, say, this is what we're looking for in an officer. We'd have to set that up.
And what are you personally, what's your personal approach to evaluating, let's continue with this example of a patrolman right out of the academy. They don't have a long track record. So what are you looking for specifically in an interview setting out of them to tell you that they have these qualities that you're looking for?
Well, we give them scenario-based questions. We give them specific interview questions to try to elicit some sort of reaction or response from them and see how they would process and formulate an answer to the question and see how they would react. We'd put them in a scenario and see if they're level-headed or hot-headed, if they're someone who is willing to compromise or work through things, if they have alternative plans or resolutions to do something. Again, using my example I used earlier, where I could have summoned them, I could have let that person go when I was asked that time, but I chose to arrest them for whatever that reason was. So, we look at things like that if they can figure out what the options are and see how educated they are and how knowledgeable and workarounds they have. There's lots of things.
Any follow-ups?
All sir?
Want to bring us home?
Don't bring it home. No trick final questions, just the obvious. Why should we pick you for this position?
Why should you pick me for this position? I'll tell you why you should pick me for this position is that I've learned to love the community of Littleton for all the research I've done, all the embedding that I've done over the past 6 months. It's really become a great community for me to spend time in. I often say to my wife, hey, what are we doing tonight? Let's go down to Littleton. And, we can only do so many things, so many times. And I'm looking forward to the farms and the farm stands and places open that not necessarily may be open right now, and the greenhouses and things like that. But I've really grown to really love and adore the community of Littleton. But I'll tell you that one of the reasons you should hire me because I have the leadership experience, particularly at the executive level. I have the leadership training that the candidate's going to need to be able to work in this job. I have the master's degree education and the leadership training and education there that I'll need to perform this job. So I think that's a great reasons to hire me for the position. I want to work collectively with everybody here in the room, both you folks up front and the folks in the back as well, the community members, to make this a great community to work, live, and raise your families in. I think I've done a great job through my professional career of learning about myself, learning about leadership, learning about communities, and I think I want to take all that. I'm ready to lead a police department. I'm particularly ready to lead the Littleton Police Department into the 21st century in applying all the 21st century philosophies in the task force report. I think I'm a great candidate. I think I'm the person for you.
Thank you, John. Okay, I think that brings us home. John, thank you very much. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to do some deliberation with hopes of coming to a decision tonight.
Sure.
Thank you very much for your time. We know this is a long process. We're almost there.
It's like the marathon. I see Boylston Street. Heartbreak Hill was the assessment center, so we're on the way. I hope the laurel wreath is on my head, so.
There's no Kenyans in front of you, so you get that going for you.
Whoever it takes, I work with everybody. Mr. Tully, thank you. Great meeting you. Hope to see you soon. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for coming here and going through the process.
Okay, definitely gonna do this deliberation. I just give everybody just a few minutes, just kind of gather your notes, gather your thoughts. I drank way too much water, so
Okay.
I'll just take like 5 minutes, so. Everybody just like a 5-minute timeout, and we'll come back a quarter of. Want to flip the switch?
I was injured.
Okay, we are back, folks, and so, again, I want to thank everybody that was involved in this process. I think it was a very open and fair process. It certainly, as both candidates mentioned, it was a challenging process, and they certainly, the cream rose to the top. These two guys came before us, and I appreciate them coming out tonight, and all of you coming out tonight, and hearing the interviews, and now we have the pleasure of being able to have some deliberation, have some conversation, discuss what we all just witnessed, and hopefully come to a conclusion, and select who we choose to be our number one candidate or number two candidate. So, does the board have any particular preference as to how we proceed? Do we want to, well, let me say this about how we proceed. I do want to say that these two candidates worked their tails off. Both great candidates. And I want to make sure that any conversation or discussion that we do have tonight highlights the fact that we have two very good candidates in front of us. I'd like to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the process, and if you feel as though one candidate excelled over another candidate, I'd rather see it be a positive light instead of saying, you know, this one isn't good at this or isn't good at that. I'd like to just try to keep the process as positive as possible. I think that's it. And just a reminder to the folks, you know, if we're making comments up here and you agree or disagree, just ask that you kind of hold your tongue and your hands, and please don't offer any gasps or any audible or physical audibles. I appreciate that. So, folks, we want to take them comparatively? Do we want to take them one at a time? Any thoughts, suggestions? Cindy, you and Joe sat, Joe and Cindy, you guys sat with the screening committee, and you guys kind of went through this process, and I'm sure that you had to do some deliberation and kind of come to a conclusion and make some determinations in order to get us to this point. So if you have some thoughts or ideas on how to proceed, I'd be open to that, or I can be prescriptive and say, this is how I think we should do it.
You can go, but when we get to the final stage, we actually went through a number of things that we might want to do. Whether we went, at that time, you had 5 or 6 candidates that you're going to go through with, and we went through a discussion. We allowed each person to go through and make comments about it. The one thing I want to say too is that we have the ability or the knowledge that we sat in for all of them. I have 2 sets of notes here from tonight and from the other. Some of the questions are almost the same, but answered differently. Nothing that was any more negative than, it wasn't negative. It was just, took it in a different aspect, that a different answer, but still a good answer. So I guess eventually we'll have to get our minds together and go through, maybe individually go through, or do question by question. I don't know. Cindy, I don't know what you want to.
Right. Well, I think the screening process was different in that we had a grading system, we had a rating system, you know, so but we did have a discussion about what we felt were some standout points with the candidates, and we did talk about the way they answered a question. Some of them answered, you know, some of the questions at that time were really interesting, and I think, you know, you're right. It was nice seeing them again before us, and I think that's an advantage that Joe and I have. I wish that the other members of the board could have gone through that part of the process as well. But like you said, their answers were different, but they weren't drastically different or detrimentally different. So, I mean, I don't know how you want to move forward now.
Okay, so let's.
I don't have a set, I don't think we
That's
can
fine.
relate it to the screening process
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'd rather kind of vet it all out and
Right.
have this open conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I
Some
think
thoughts.
the process to this point has been very structured, and I would, my own personal remarks, come from a place of stepping back about what the position is and what it needs, in my view, informed by the public, and then, where the department stands and what we need to do there and how these people match up to that. So it's important, I could deconstruct my thought process and say, okay, we'll just talk about candidate A and candidate B, but that's not how I arrive at it myself, and I'd just be interested to hear how people viewed it in their own terms, the totality, and structure it however you want, but that's kind of how I would approach it personally.
Okay. Chase, any comments or any thoughts based on the input from our colleagues, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that let me say this, there are probably wrong ways to do this, so I think there are a lot of different right ways.
Okay.
And what we've laid out sounds as reasonable as any other right way to me so far.
Okay. I don't know that we need to go question by question. I don't know that that's, I don't know that I'd identify that as the right way. I think that's going to be laborious.
Right.
And I think there's well, I can speak for myself that I have a very specific flavor for each candidate. Very different candidates, which is good. I mean, I'm glad that we have two very unique and different candidates, both highly qualified in their own regard. So I guess, not to deconstruct Paul's thought process, because that would scare me.
You have to get out that little piece of paper.
But, I mean, I think I'm just going to start a conversation, and let's just kind of go from there and see where it takes us.
Now, as far as starting that conversation, I'll tell you, and this comes back to opposing, I actually went right back to the job description. This is what the screening committee put together for, what are we looking for? What does the goal line look like? And would suggest that this may be at least a good jumping off point for that structured conversation.
If that's the pleasure of the board, then we can kind of review that.
Sure.
So the job description that I have is a 4-page document. You've got a 1-page.
I have
so
the
it's a lot easier
ideal
for me to
candidate
read.
profile.
So ideal candidate profile, constructed by the screening committee.
Yeah, I think,
So ours
I
is
think
basically
DNS might put that together.
the job description itself. This is the personnel job description for the chief
Right.
of police for Littleton. So I'm going to read the position purpose, just to kind of give us kind of a baseline, and we can,
Okay.
let's jump off from there.
Sure.
The purpose of this position is to perform complex supervisory, administrative, and professional work in planning, organizing, and directing the operations of Littleton Police Department and its staff and equipment, in the protection of life and property, and in the prevention and suppression of crime, performs all other related work as required. We all have that in our job description, right? So that's the high-level position purpose. And then there's bullets, supervision, scope of supervision, the job environment, essential functions, recommended requirements, special requirements, knowledge, ability, and skill, and physical requirements. So that's what we have as far as our job description to kind of answer the HR bell. So, relative to that, how would we?
So you don't want to do a candidate by candidate comparison? You just
We can
wanna-
do that.
You wanna
I'm
just
open
look
to
at
doing
the-
it however we want. This is
How
my first time hiring a police chief, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Okay,
So, I didn't get the book.
What?
Hiring a police chief for dummies.
okay. Well, we have the ideal candidate profile as well, as far as education, experience, command leadership training, FBI National Academy, willingness and ability to commit to the position for 5 more years, Demonstrate a commitment to best practices in law enforcement, skilled in balancing roles as community leader, department manager, administrator, implementing effective training programs for police officers and dispatch personnel, strong background and commitment to contemporary concepts of policing, a track record of creative and successful community outreach, ability to maintain a visible and active presence personally and professionally in a manner that is highly ethical and above reproach, a strong ability to communicate clearly with all stakeholders, strong budgeting skills and successful grant writing and administrative experience, the ability to listen and to provide the highest level of customer service, to strategic thinker who can create and implement long-term plans for the development of the organization's operations and staff, and the ability to effectively manage, guide, train young police officers to serve in a small-town setting that fully respects individual rights and dignity, ability to foster a strong team with the police department. So I think we saw those qualities in the candidates tonight. Not across the board, but I think each candidate in one way or another exhibited some of those qualities.
A good cross-section of those qualities.
Right, and so I was just looking at exceptional skill set, confidence, professionalism, experience, and ability. When I was sitting before the candidates tonight, those were the key words that came to my mind.
Confidence.
Exceptional skill set, confidence, professionalism, experience, and ability.
See, we don't have that in front of me. Would I get confidence,
Professionalism, experience, and ability. And the first one, I just came up with these tonight, was exceptional skill set. Those were qualities that I was looking for in the candidates tonight.
Okay. So that's
And
not
a lot of
something-
that
that's not- Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
That's not from the screening committee, this is.
No, but a
kind
lot of
so
it
that you
comes
could-
from this language that we came up with in the job description with the ideal candidate profile. And there are specific skills in the document that Chase is holding that we were looking for.
I don't know, I mean, it was
It's this document.
it was our packet, it's the Executive Employment Search, Chief of Police, Town of Littleton, Mass. document. And what this does is it lays out at a more detailed level what some of those elements of excellence Cindy just described mean. Municipal setting, strong knowledge of principles, documentation of relationship building and staff development, knowledge of procedures related to community-based police services, presentation in both verbal and written forms, use of emerging technologies. So that's a big mishmash of words unless people have the documents in front of them. So I'm not sure
We need
this
to have
is a
that
useful
stuff, I'm
guide.
sure it's technically fine, but I mean, in my mind, that's mostly, it's objective terminology that begs subjective responses. You're gonna find what you wanna find to match up to some of those
Right.
terms. And I don't know, if I might, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
before I even talk about the individual candidates, I'll talk about the situation. We interviewed, and they acknowledge it as much. One candidate is a hire from within candidate, not generically so, a very independent, thinker and an individual in his own right, and the other one's a candidate from outside of Littleton with his own strengths and, considerations that he brings to the table. So I think it's impossible to ignore that question, at least in part, is that a factor? And in my mind, it should be considered for, and here's how I approach it, I should say, is that, in a town, in a department where we promote the idea that you can rise up through the ranks, that we, when all things are equal, should be good to that word. That doesn't guarantee anybody anything. But so the circumstances of the day, whenever there's an opening here, whether it's a sergeant opening or a deputy's opening, or in this case, a chief's opening, it's the proper time to sit back and say, well, where do we stand? Do we have internal candidates that are up to it? And conversely, do we have systemic problems that call out for somebody from the outside to come in and solve them? And, that's kind of the dialectic I've been going through in my mind while listening to these two folks answer their questions. And, I have my own thoughts on that. I don't think that promoting from within, again, is a panacea to all situations. But I do think that we had a couple of candidates through this process, internal, that showed that they are up to the job. So I think they, in my mind, cleared that hurdle of being competent, one of them being one of our finalists, Sergeant Pennard. So the next question is, well, where does the department stand? The last change we had, how many years ago was it, John, when you retired? 4. Well, not that many years ago, was essentially two contemporaries, one retiring and another contemporary moving into his position. And, with that, there's probably less change you're going to get than you would by having a generational change coming from a much, younger officer taking the place of a, retiring or, chief leaving for whatever reason. So I've been around long enough to remember that when Chief Kelly replaced Chief O'Day, that was a dramatic change, even though it was promotion from within. Chief King succeeding Chief Kelly, not so much, but for very understandable reasons. So then I get back to the question of, when I'm talking to citizens in town, well, what's the perception of the department and its delivery, and what is my own experience in working with the department? And I won't skimp on any criticism in a moment, but I will say that I think my impression and the feedback I get from the community is we're pretty well served by a department that pretty well reflects the community that we are. And that's a changing community. It's a changing demographic, and we all know that. But you know what? If you take a look at the makeup of that department today versus 10, 15 years ago, so has the membership there. And that's been with eyes open. We hire more and more educated officers. We hire more diversity. We emphasize interaction with the community at a citizen-to-citizen level. And I think it pays dividends. We get personnel problems from time to time, and those are serious, shouldn't be taken lightly. I guess I look at the severity of those issues, how we compare to other communities that, do we have more or less problems like that? How do we resolve them? Are there lingering issues that just don't get addressed? I'll speak to one that just reflects a lot of the critical commentary I received over the past couple of weeks as people knew we were narrowing down the choice were incidents, some of them many years ago, some of them not that long ago, which speak to interactions some women have had with the department, either with specific officers or, within the department, and whether or not there was a cultural issue, at some point in time, even if it's not the case now, in the way that complaints from, certain individuals against the town or people who felt that they were in a no-win situation in dealing with, an officer or weren't satisfied that, that all transparency was, in play when they brought legitimate complaints. Just that whole notion of fairness and whether or not that was, whether that's a serious problem for Littleton. And I've been wrestling with that a bit, but I do think that the issues that sounded most egregious as I heard them expressed to me, and I give great thanks to the people who came forward, mostly women of the town, that the farther back you go, the more wincing my response was in the way that reflects how people or situations were dealt with farther ago. But the more recent situations, and that was internal to the department a year and a half ago, I think it was a situation with an officer where there was a complaint, a lot of this is, if it's not already public record, it probably should be, was handled, in my estimation, with dispatch, and it was resolved quickly, and the officer's gone. And that's different than how things might have been done before. So, I just want to get it on the table that, as a reflection of the people that called me, those are concerns people have, and I'm sitting here putting that very much into consideration, is does that rise to the level of like a systemic problem that needs to beg an outside response to solve it? And my surmise at this point is that it isn't, because isn't likely to be, because I don't think our situation is all that different than other towns, other departments, in that there's been a change as the morale within the department's formerly macho atmosphere just has to give way to a new world. Littleton's not different than a lot of other places, and I think the individual incidents that have come up certainly warrant our attention to make sure that that's not the norm and that doesn't happen again. I think recent track record has been positive, and I think the change that needed to occur along those lines, not to overstate the problem in the first place, is largely already underway or has taken place. It's not going to be solved by just saying it's over, but I don't believe that, that, which, in my mind stands out as probably the most pungent criticism I've heard of the department, is one that requires, we just have to bring an outsider in to solve it. I don't think, if that were, if we hadn't handled things differently, or the department hadn't handled things differently a couple of years ago, I might be a little more open to that. But I just wanted to say that that's in reflection of the people that contacted me. I hear you, so that's in my consideration. So there's where I come from, a philosophical standpoint about what the town's needs are in toto, in the big picture, before I sit down and hash through the two candidates. So there, just throwing something on the table.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank-
No, it's a lot, Paul, and I appreciate you kind of making that comment, and I think that, I know each of us have used our data plans over the last couple of days. We've gotten a lot of outreach, and this is a very important appointment. And I do appreciate you making those comments. I think many of us got the same comments, and I think there's no sense in me reiterating it. I think you succinctly summarized and set the table for us. So as far as next steps, we've got one internal candidate, we've got one external candidate. Again, they're very, very different candidates. To take Paul's statement to the next level, I don't think one candidate should be eliminated because they are an internal candidate for the reasons you stated. That being said, the external candidate is a highly qualified individual, and he stands on his merits as well. So I think we need to start that discussion and
since we're on
assess
it,
the merits.
would you mind if I give you my thoughts on internal versus external candidate in a broader sense?
Sure. No, I wouldn't mind.
I'm going to do it anyway, so, I don't think an internal candidate is an unalloyed good. There are pros and cons to it, certainly, and, but as far as my comparison of the candidates, that internal component is worth something to me, that the connection to the community, the knowledge of who can help me solve this, who do I need to reach out to? That's a very important consideration, and certainly would help Sergeant Pennard get off the ground faster in certain respects. That said, I do want to acknowledge the fact that there is benefit to an external candidate in certain contexts. Even if there is no wholesale issue with anything, there is benefit to bringing in an external candidate from time to time. And given that we've had internal hires for 35 years or something like that. I think even if we were to hire externally, we can make a credible argument that those opportunities are very much there, especially if we make an external hire based on qualifications, not based on, as Paul said, the need to, radically alter the department. So that external knowledge is, I think, fundamentally important. As well, the other matter at hand is, frankly, the opportunity with an external hire to develop who is quite clearly two different internal candidates that have a remarkable amount of potential, given that, one was sitting in front of us tonight. Hiring externally helps us develop that candidate down the line as well. And I don't want to lose track of that benefit of an external candidate. It's not, hiring externally doesn't then mean that our internal candidates are gone and away from us. The last thing I'll say on the internal versus external is that the internal candidate will have some challenges coming from a sergeant level up to chief. I think challenges that are different than what a deputy chief might see going from deputy chief to chief. And so that is, even though the internal nature of the internal, it's a bad sentence, the internal candidate, I think, ultimately gets some credit for that. It's more complicated, particularly going from sergeant to chief.
Thank you.
Before speaking about the individual candidates, and they're both qualified, and we're fully aware that statements have been made that they're very, very different. In a lot of ways, they're very, very the same. They both have a strong skill set. But going back to, I guess we probably hear from different people in our own little spheres of influence or whatever, but and in my travels, in my work, and where I've been stationed different places, I see other police forces, and I see our police force. And I'm very, very comfortable on how our police force handles things. And I don't want to use other towns, but there's towns that are nearby that have problems that we never see. And when you don't see things in the newspaper and think, well, newspaper's the wrong thing to do, but I think we have a very good department, and I had a chance to talk to Superintendent Clenchey. I hope you don't mind if I mention this, out of executive session, because he didn't make a comment in executive session, but I wanted to talk to him afterwards. And he made a comment that just caught me, where he said that he's worked with very, very many school departments in his years in education, and Littleton is the best. I think that states something right there. So,
School department, police department.
what did I say?
You said school departments.
I meant the police department. He's very comfortable working with the department, and they've answered his questions, and obviously the SROs that we've had in the past and that we have now are breaking that notion of what I was joking about, you get in trouble and you're going to be arrested. They've decided to change that, and I think Littleton has taken a lead in that type of thing, where you have someone like Sergeant Pinard that's actually asked to speak at graduation. That tells you that he's reaching down to the younger people, and that's important in the future, and it's important now. And so now I'm going into candidates. I don't know whether you want me to do that. And
I think it's pretty,
and I'll go
it's
back
pretty
to
open.
Mr. Santora impresses me in so many ways. Having the ability to see him interviewed twice, I thought he did much better. Maybe it was because this is the big one, whatever. Not that he had any faults today, but the first time he impressed me very much. But both candidates have strong attributes in different areas. I think the honesty of both of them, when they talk about things that happened in the past and how it helps solve problems. Sergeant Bernard coming right out and saying, you know, one of my problems at the beginning might be budget, but here's how I'm going to solve it. And something we didn't get to see tonight that he did in his very first interview, he handed us a piece of paper, and I was so impressed by it. It was 30, 60, 90. What his plans were for the first 30 days, the next 60 days, the next 90. And I wish he had done that, because he has a plan all set to go. And I imagine, talking to Mr. Santoro, the time we had him before, he had a plan too. So I guess, in a lot of ways, I'm up in the air. I want to make sure that my viewpoint as far as the police department is very positive, but I still will entertain any comments from other people about the candidates. And I'll probably expand on it when things come to my mind.
Well, sure. I think we've had some great success recently hiring from outside. If you look at Chris Stoddard, you look at Anthony, you look at the Council on Aging. So I don't necessarily feel that going with an internal candidate is always the best practice. I think it's more important to be open-minded and look at the skill set for the job. Certainly, Officer Pennard, Sergeant Pennard's been embedded in the community. He's everywhere. Everybody sees him. He's at school functions, community functions. He's nailed community policing in our community, absolutely. He's, has some education. I know he's working on his master's degree. The budget, his budgeting skills concerned me, just as far as transitioning into that role. I think just building on what Chase mentioned, transitioning from sergeant to chief of police, I think that there's a reason there's a tier system in a police department, so you get the proper management and training that you need, the skill set that you need to go to that executive command level experience. And not to say that he won't get there, but I just don't think that he's there quite yet. I think, I don't want to hold anything against Deputy Chief Santoro just because he's not from our community whatsoever. I'm just trying to look at it as if he was an internal candidate as well. I think he's definitely at a disadvantage because he's not from Littleton. He's certainly not the hometown favorite. But I think he has an exceptional skill set. He has confidence. He's articulate. He's well-spoken. He has the experience, and I think he would seamlessly transition into the Littleton Police Department and be really effective for us. And that's not to take anything away from Sergeant Pennard and the commitment to our community. I just don't feel he's there yet to that level. I just don't think that he's ready yet. And as far as, I think a fresh perspective will be very beneficial for the Littleton Police Department. I think he'll have an impartial view. Mr. Santoro, Deputy Santoro, gave that analogy when he came on as deputy chief. The existing chief has been there for 30 years. He said, look around, tell me what I'm missing. And I think you see that in any job. I see it at my job. I know when I went into my job, I had fresh ideas. I had a different perspective. Because I think after a while, you don't see things anymore. And I just think it would be very beneficial to have someone come in with his level of experience to take a look at what we've been doing, what we are doing, and maybe we can do it better. I have no concerns with him transitioning, just for the examples he gave. He has moved around. It's not his first rodeo going from one job to another job and integrating into a different department in a different community. So I don't think that would be an issue at all. And this isn't in any way to undermine Sergeant Pennard and what he's done for our community and what he's contributed and his skill set. I just feel that Deputy Santoro is the better candidate and the better fit at this time.
As far as advantages and disadvantages of being an internal candidate or an external candidate, I think there's advantage and disadvantage to either one. I think, with Matt, he's being the internal candidate, there's a lot of people that know him. He mentioned he's the, with the exception of the former Chief Kelly, he is the most notable member of the police department for the last 16 years. And I wouldn't contest that. I think that is the case. But because of that, we know everything about Matt for the last 16 years, so the good, bad, the ugly, whatever. And, so with that can be an advantage, it can be a disadvantage. And for John, we don't know that. We don't know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so for the past 16 years or 25 years or what have you. There's another comment I had. Not specific to either candidate, but, I think that I'm looking at this, I'm not gonna say that. We're all looking at this for the betterment of the town. We all want this for all the right reasons, or at least what we believe to be all the right reasons. And I think that we've got two fantastic candidates in front of us. There's definitely a difference between the two of them. And we need to determine, I'm gonna use the term better fit, which candidate we think is gonna be the best fit for us.
This is by far from my closing item. I hope a lot of people were doing the same sort of exercise I was when you heard each of the candidates answering the same questions, and then they, my ears particularly pricked up, came through the ibuprofen and keyed in that when they mentioned the same language, same terms, or even same incidents. For me, those were most defining. When you think of the question of early on in your career, what mistake did you have? In each case, they had brought up making an arrest that they later regretted.
Overzealous.
However, the differences in my mind were the rationale behind it. In the case of Deputy Chief Santoro, very logically, he later on realized, oh, that kind of screwed up a relationship the other officers had. It was a rational approach. But with Sergeant Pennard, his was he regretted the incident because he, on further thought, looked back at the woman in question and said, I didn't need to do that. And it was his word was empathy. And, I applaud both of those motives. But if I had to, pick, what do I really kind of want to hope, my chief possesses? You can teach rationale, but you can't teach empathy. And I'm not saying John doesn't have that at all. I'm just saying it was paramount enough to Matt in his presentation that, it just came out. And that was a case where both people asked the same questions, came up with the same answers for different reasons.
Yeah, they both, under that same question, they both referenced Citizens for Restorative Justice.
Right.
And there was a very different approach to that. I mean, Matt's comment was sometimes doing the right thing isn't necessarily the right thing. And John was very practical, very, policy-driven, very black and white, or,
I would say
by the
one,
book.
I like this construct of chatting about questions. So I will say one of my notes that distinguished them there, though, was that Deputy,
John and Matt, I think that works for everybody, right?
So-
Everybody knows what we're talking about?
John articulated a leadership approach to, to taking that nugget of information, that experience, and translating it into a leadership context. And that's fundamentally what we're asking the chief to do, is translate their experience into leadership. And whereas Matt, mentioned, talk to younger officers to help them understand that, but he had a much less clear philosophy about how to transition or change or convert those learning items into something that he can actually add to the department and bring along his younger staff. And so I was less interested in the specific circumstances and much more interested in what it says about their maturity with respect to leadership.
Be interested, Chase, in your reaction then. I asked a question which wasn't part of the 10 that we had adopted, because I think it needed to be addressed, and it was an opportunity for, John Santoro to speak to the differences between campus police and town police, or for that matter, his earlier position, emergency management. And, I wrote down some of his quotes. just a different ball team. It's the same game, no difference. I don't think there will be any challenges just using data to allocate resources. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Campus police is not the same as a small town, and it's not just generic plug it in, plug it out. And there should be more of a nuanced appreciation of that. For Matt to sit here and say, I get it, I don't know enough about the budgeting process, that's something I need to dig into. I would hope that another guy whose weaknesses, I don't really, know the town other than by a virtual tour, to say, hey, you know what, there probably are differences that I don't see there, and I got to be open to that. And I didn't hear a whole lot of openness to that, and that could lead to a problem. That's a problem you can work out in negotiation and say, hey, no, don't overlook those differences, but, that's what came out in the answer.
I agree. I know we want to stay away from weaknesses, but that was certainly his weakest response, in my opinion, was the,
If I could just piggyback on one of the questions you had relative to the leadership approach that was demonstrated by John. He absolutely, with everything he did, there was a leadership approach, kind of a command staff answer. But it was very, everything was a hypothetical. When you pushed him a couple of times to give you a specific, other than the Poland Spring, he came up with the chocolate chip cookie, specifically asked him about diversity or people of racial profiling stuff. It just felt like every time we pushed him for an answer, we got a hypothetical, frankly. And it was, even with his examples that were his experiential examples, they were lacking a lot of detail, and I had a tough time.
Yeah.
I think it was intentional, but and then to his point, he said they were several years ago, so I don't remember all the details. So,
Yeah.
I don't think there was any jeopardy of him violating any of the staff that he commands. It was a style thing, and it was very much, John is an extremely bright individual. You look at his resume, he does have a master's degree. He is very well educated. He's gone to the FBI, the MPI, he's got his master's. He answered that relative to the tools and training question. But it's very much textbook in my eye. And I'm having a tougher time seeing John translate the deputy chief position at Framingham State with 7,500 people, 1,000 or 1,500 of which are staff, on a 100-acre campus, or two 100-acre campuses, to leading Littleton's police department. And that's, for laying it out there, and Paul mentioned something about, Matt mentioned the budget, he mentioned empathy. So there's things that did not come out that I'm not sure are teachable in one candidate, and there are things that came out that are, we can identify them as weaknesses, but I think are teachable or trainable. Now, do we want somebody that's going to be trained on the job? That's something that we collectively have to decide upon. We've got a deputy chief, and we've got a sergeant. That's, Matt used the term elephant in the room earlier, and that's certainly something that we need to determine whether or not that's how we want to proceed. If we decide to proceed with a sergeant to become our chief, we need to, these two came before us. These are the two that are the finalists.
Right.
So, and Cindy and I sat in the assessment center, at least a large part of the day, and these two were the two finalists. They did very well. And going through that process, I'm telling you, I hope I never have to do it in order to secure any type of advancement in my own career, but
I don't think I'm seeing what you're seeing with Santoro and the examples. I thought
I'm not seeing it either.
I think he gave great examples, and he talked about, specifically the issue with diversity on the campus, and he took the initiative to start that group. I certainly think he possesses empathy just by doing that, and it's right, but, and I thought he gave
I saw it.
specific examples.
I saw his, I mean, and he, of his own admittance, he said, I just wanted to make sure that I got that out there. I wanted to make sure I worked that in.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't answer your question, but I wanted to make sure
No, that
I
was at
mentioned
the
that.
tail end of him answering the question, actually.
I saw that as him answering a question and then
Taking advantage of it.
wisely using, I mean, interviewing is in part frankly, it's in part a game, right? And so you need to score your
Art
points when
versus
you
science.
can,
Art
right?
versus
And
science, right, yeah.
he answered the question and then wisely transitioned to saying what he wanted to say, and
I can see
I
that.
don't have any
hold that
problem
against
with him doing that, or either one of them doing, you know what your strengths are in terms of either your resume or your vision, and, double down on that. But I come away from it on a detail level, being a lot more certain of what a Chief Pennard would do in specifics, more bicycle patrols and walking patrols for the community policing asset, additional sessions for the student police academy, geographical, they both said they wanted to embrace, and I think they even used the same word here with the millennials. But Matt was very specific in ideas, geographical policing, the cyber crimes tracking. That it's like, okay, I can see the specifics coming out of that, and a lot of the same topics touched on by John. I took notes for both of them, and I'm not seeing, okay, where's the checklist of the things that you can expect to see being looked at, considered in the first, few weeks, months of either one of their terms. And I think, obviously, there's a learning curve for either one of them.
Absolutely.
One, primarily because he's coming from the outside, even though it's a comparable-sized department, and the other because he's jumping up effectively 2 steps in the process. But I'll tell you what, we've got history of that in Littleton. Sergeant Kelly was selected over a deputy chief at the time, or I think it was a lieutenant was the terminology. So sometimes the person a couple of steps down the organizational chart ladder is the right person, and their skills, shouldn't be put on hold for, ever. You don't know when you're going to get your next opportunity.
What you've just laid out are technical things that, we talk about what's learnable and what's not learnable. And to me, looking at these 2 resumes past this prologue, right, and the world of difference between John's experience actually leading and developing younger staff. I mean, there are a couple of missions that we have for the chief, and that to me has got to be at the top of the list, because not only are you developing the staff, but you're setting a culture, and it should be a culture of integrity. I note that John used the word integrity not less than 3 or 4 times, suggesting its significance to him. But in terms of skills that you can teach, leadership is incredibly difficult to teach. And I'm not suggesting that Matt's leadership skills and abilities are not there to grow. I'm saying John's got a proven track record of leading and developing his younger staff. And the examples that he gave, I mean, he danced around the diversity thing because he didn't want to, he
And I
wisely
brought up the
did.
Kenyan thing.
Yeah, right. Nicely done. It's always on the interviewer to stick his foot in his mouth.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's not the Kenyan part, but the prologue to that, the marathon, that was one of the few instances where it's like, I want to see what makes this guy tick. I mean, show us the human side of you, and that was it came in one of the offhand remarks. Up to that point, everything was kind of like, check the box, virtual, buy the book, this is what the process is. Oh, come on, that's not how the real world works. Flesh it out, put it in human terms. And a lot of the same topics handled by Matt were reference to actual incidents out on patrol or encounters with people, dead
That's precisely my
infants.
concern, though, is that they were instances out on patrol or with a single officer as opposed to leading a department.
Look, he used the word leadership a lot, but, okay.
So if I could just speak to that point real quickly, I mean, it's a small town, so I think most of us know most of the department. Fair to say. And over the past several years, I think that Matt has played a leadership role with the younger staff. I think he's been a mentor, he's been a leader, he's been, not necessarily by title, In some cases, if people are on his patrol, certainly, it is by title if he's the shift sergeant. But in speaking with many of the younger officers, and even some of the more senior officers, one of the things they spoke to was he's a mentor to the patrols. He's a leader. He's respected. So although the title isn't there, I do think that it's, I think that he has that respect. So that transition part of it, I think, is not going to be the hurdle that we may be presenting it as. And I mean, John clearly has it. I mean, he's got the command. So I honestly, I hate to use this term, but in looking at the two candidates, and I hesitate to say this, but John is an extremely intelligent individual, very well schooled, educated, and I almost feel like he would be, the best fit for him would be a deputy in a very large department. I think he just has that kind of command presence. He's very by the book, and I think that the term that
How is it that we're throwing around by the book as a derogatory term?
I
I
don't
guess
know.
I'm
So,
expecting my,
so I'll say he's more of an academic, I think, as a law enforcement officer, where I think Matt would be more of a working chief. In Littleton, I think that works better.
so you could make that argument exactly the opposite way, which is that John is interested in policy, procedure, consistency, whereas Matt is inclined to shoot from the hip. They're the exact
So I
same
wouldn't
things,
make that argument
said
because
completely
Matt was
different
very-
ways.
Matt was the number two guy with our accreditation, which is exactly policy, procedure, but he's got that other side of it as well, that empathy and compassion. I don't know whether or not John has that. He didn't present it.
If we can go back to like the community part of it too, out of both candidates, I think community policing is the wave of the future, and it's something that we have to put out there as one of the top things that has to be worked on by all departments. And I think what Matt has shown us is that he's a true leader when it comes time for community policing. He's out there. He's let it be known. It's some of the questions and answers he gave, like, he wants to make a difference to Littleton for the officers, to the people. He wants to help people in good times and bad times. And he is ingrained in the community. He's been here. He knows. So, in my opinion, we have someone that we know his abilities, and this isn't anything against the Deputy Santoro at all, but I even liked his answer when he talked about bias, and when I think Mr. Santoro gave his, he went around bias by saying, well, I'd separate him first, and then he improved on it after that. But then he also went off and talked about a different set of eyes, which had nothing to do with the part about being biased. But going back to the community part, I think that it's extremely important. I think that the sergeant has proved it over and over that it's the wave of the future. It's how we have to police. We can't just have that old warrior style that was out there when I was a kid. And I think it's through leadership that he has shown that makes me lean toward him a lot. And the community policing just is part of it.
But the thing is, there was nothing in, well, let me say it this way. John was able to articulate specific things that he has implemented or been involved with, strategically putting together in the context of community policing. I have no doubt in my mind that Matt is very good at implementing community policing, but those are different things. Implementing it is what we're asking a sergeant and a patrolman to do. Strategically, what is the direction that we want to go in terms of community policing? That's a command level evaluation, and I see in John's resume and in John's experience evidence of his ability to do that, to both listen to. I mean, he gave the anecdote of a younger staff who's a football player. Okay, let's pair them up. I see evidence of strategic thinking there, whereas I see evidence of good implementation on Matt's part. And those are, well, one is a more chief-like quality than the other, in my opinion.
So you thought that with John, there was examples of a plan relative to community policing, based on the example of football player?
I mean, that was one of the examples that he gave, for sure. And what was more significant about that to me is actually hearing an idea and taking it and following through and building a program around it. I mean, certainly, John is able to rattle off the,
Sarah?
yeah, exactly, the strategy is a bit more, but I'm also encouraged to see that ability to engage in that dialogue, recognize a good idea, and implement it. And that's what I really keyed in on.
Hasn't been implemented, but.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can go on, but I won't, on in more detail on each of these candidates in my assessment, because I want to avoid getting into having to make one of the candidates lesser than he is to make the case for the other one. I think we've all put our ideas out there. I don't know if anybody feels that they can be moved dramatically from one place to the other. I mean, I've considered them both. I think they're both, I can see both of them doing the job. I can much easier see Matt Pinard doing it, and in Littleton anyway, and seeing it be a success. And I'm willing to stand by that. I don't know, I don't know what more we're gonna hear on things, but, that isn't to say that if Matt sent a memo in, changed my mind, not interested, John Santora would probably be a terrific chief too. I just didn't, I was waiting for the opportunity to be impressed that there was something dramatically different and positive that would come of it, and I don't have the vision of that, and I don't want to overstate that. It's just, I can't say, oh yeah, we had to give it to that guy because of X. It's just too comparable, and on a qualification level and just much more of a comfort level, I'm happy to admit, with Sergeant Bernard's relationship with the community, and I don't think we should
So it's almost a fit,
undersell that.
a fit thing.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting that these qualifications are comparable?
For the job, sure. I mean, I don't buy that being a deputy chief of a 15-member campus police officer all of a sudden makes him so much more qualified than a sergeant of our own 18, 19-member department, which runs shifts and handles all sorts of activity, not just patrolling the campus. I mean, that's an important job in and of itself, but it's a limited job, and it's different from a town. And, if there were a demonstrated bigger role, say, in the budget development process that he has by virtue of being deputy chief, I didn't hear him say that.
He touched on that more during his first interview.
Well, perhaps, and it's just, I think if that were something he wanted to emphasize with us, he would have, and he had the opportunity, so.
Do you have some comments?
I am just not comfortable having someone come run our police department on the feeling of a good fit. I think the qualifications, to me, are much more important. It's too important of a job.
I think we've already identified that we feel that they're both qualified.
That doesn't
Someone
imply
had-
equivalency.
Right.
They
I don't
may
mean
meet
that
the
they're not both
minimums, but-
qualified. I just mean that one candidate, in my opinion, is more qualified on a different level,
Okay.
more prepared and ready to fit the position.
Well,
I mean, I agree with Paul at this point. I don't think we're going to change anybody's mind at the table.
I think you're probably right.
So- Might as well just move for a motion.
Joe, do you have anything to add? Do you have anything to add? Want to entertain a motion?
No.
Yeah.
Defer to my senior colleague.
I move that we
John.
I'm gonna, yeah, I'm trying to get the computer to show you the motion.
I know these computers are new to you, Keith.
Yeah, this one is just frozen up, so let me try unplugging it. Plugging it back in.
Try paying the bill, they usually work for me.
Yeah, well, it'll, it was here, there. This was the,
There was no motion
Right.
in the packet, right?
no, this was the draft form that was emailed out to you yesterday, so. Except
Oh,
that.
paper, he's got paper.
No proposed motion.
No,
It's a
this was,
discussion,
this
yeah.
was what was emailed out yesterday.
I move the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law 41, Section 97A, to appoint Matt Penard of,
Lunenburg.
Lunenburg, Mass, as Chief of Police, Littleton Police Department, effective July 1st, 2018, subject to negotiation and execution of terms of an employment contract under Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 1080, and completion of a background check.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded, and I believe this is just a, it's not a roll call, am I correct?
No, it's not, we're not in executive session, so it's not.
So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
It's 3-2 vote. It's unfortunate.
Anthony, do you need our notes?
Anson, didn't put the end.
Thank you, folks.
And, Mr. Chairman, good job running it and everyone keeping things civil.
Hold on.
Huh?
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Moving second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.